9 summers ago, 16-year-old Sophie Walker and her 11-year-old brother Tyler vanished during a thunderstorm while playing hide-and-seek in their grandmother's creaking Victorian farmhouse. Sheriff Raymond Blake traced muddy footprints from the back porch to the basement steps, but the trail stopped abruptly at a blank cinder wall. Despite weeks of searching cadaver dogs, volunteer drones, scanning cornfields, even clairvoyants mailing desperate letters, not a single clue emerged. No forced exit, no tire tracks, no ransom demands. Just two children who seemed to evaporate into thin air, leaving only echoes of laughter trapped in Margaret Reed's memory. Grief eventually forced the 68-year-old grandmother to padlock the basement and lease the property to strangers. Time swallowed 9 long years. In August 2025, Margaret returns to the abandoned house to prepare for a bank inspection. Alone beneath buzzing fluorescent lights, she shuffles into the basement when her cane accidentally bumps a rusted shelving unit. The aged wood screws, weakened by moisture, shear with a sickening crunch. The entire shelf groans outward on hidden hinges, revealing a doorway rimmed in oak. Behind it lies a narrow passage descending into darkness, and at the bottom, Margaret's cell phone suddenly rings an unknown caller with a voice she'd recognize anywhere. "Grandma, it's me, Sophie. We're alive, but you have to play by the rules." The summer heat pressed down on the Walker family minivan as it curved along the narrow roads of rural Michigan. Sophie Walker, 16, and freshly annoyed at having to spend 2 weeks of her summer vacation at her grandmother's farm, kept her earbuds firmly in place. Her thumb scrolled restlessly through playlists she'd already memorized. In the middle seat, 11-year-old Tyler had his nose buried in a dog-eared book about World War II submarines, occasionally murmuring facts that nobody acknowledged. "It's only 2 weeks," Evelyn Walker reminded them, glancing in the rearview mirror at her children. Her auburn hair, the same shade Sophie had inherited, was pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Grandma Margaret hasn't seen you since Christmas, and she's been alone since Grandpa passed." Daniel Walker nodded from the passenger seat, his engineer's fingers tapping a quiet rhythm on his knee. "Plus, I hear she's finally fixed up the old pool. You guys can swim whenever you want." Sophie removed one earbud. "There's no Wi-Fi out there, Dad. Like literally none. How am I supposed to work on my photography portfolio?" "Sometimes disconnecting is good for creativity," Daniel replied, exchanging a knowing look with his wife. "You might find inspiration in unexpected places." Tyler finally looked up from his book. "Grandma's house has all those hidden spaces and old rooms. Last time I found a trunk full of war medals in the attic." "See," Evelyn smiled, "adventure doesn't require Wi-Fi." Sophie rolled her eyes but couldn't completely hide her smile. For all her teenage complaints, she did love the sprawling Victorian farmhouse with its gabled roof and wraparound porch. There was something mysterious about the 130-year-old structure that had been in the Reed family for generations. The minivan crunched onto the gravel driveway just as the afternoon sun slipped behind gathering storm clouds. Margaret Reed stood on the porch, one hand gripping her wooden cane, the other waving enthusiastically. At 68, she maintained the straight-back posture of someone who had spent decades as a high school principal. Her silver hair was neatly bobbed, and despite the arthritis that had necessitated the cane, her movements were purposeful and precise. "My darlings," she called as the car doors opened. "Just in time, there's a summer storm rolling in." Sophie climbed out, stretching her long legs after the 3-hour drive. The farmhouse loomed before her, white clapboard, with dark green shutters, a silent witness to over a century of family history. As always, she felt the building watching her, as if it held secrets just beyond her reach. "Hi, Grandma," she said, accepting Margaret's fierce hug. "The place looks good." "Wait until you see the pool," Margaret beamed. "Your Uncle Victor's old company did the restoration. They found the original tile work underneath all that concrete." At the mention of Uncle Victor, Sophie noticed her father stiffen slightly. Victor Reed was Margaret's brother-in-law, and there had always been tension between him and Daniel, something about business disagreements from before Sophie was born. "Where is this famous pool?" Tyler asked, already bouncing with energy after being confined to the car. "Around and back, but let's get your things inside first," Margaret directed. "That thunder's getting closer." They unloaded suitcases as the first fat raindrops began to fall. By the time they reached the porch, the sky had darkened to an ominous gray-green and lightning flashed on the horizon. Inside the farmhouse welcomed them with the familiar scent of lemon polish and old wood. The entryway opened to a central staircase that curved up to the second floor, while doorways branched off to the living room, dining room, and kitchen. "I've put fresh sheets on your usual beds," Margaret said. "Sophie, you have the blue room, and Tyler, you're in the one with the map wallpaper." Sophie headed upstairs, dragging her suitcase behind her. The blue room was at the end of the hallway with windows overlooking the orchard. She'd always loved this space with its antique four-poster bed and faded blue wallpaper patterned with tiny silver stars. Setting her phone on the nightstand, she frowned at the no-service notification. As predicted, technology retreated here, leaving space for the house's quieter conversations. Downstairs, Margaret was showing off the newly restored pool to Daniel and Evelyn. Through the kitchen window, Sophie could see the rectangular stretch of water, now surrounded by fresh concrete and Adirondack chairs. Despite herself, she felt a flicker of excitement. Maybe swimming would make the next 2 weeks bearable. "Mom says we can swim after dinner," Tyler announced, appearing in her doorway, "but I'm going to explore first. Want to come?" Sophie hesitated. At 16, she should be too cool to join her little brother's expeditions. But the house did have its allure-hidden spaces, forgotten corners, the basement with its mysterious locked rooms that Margaret claimed were just storage, but always seemed something more. "Fine," she sighed, pretending reluctance. "But I'm not crawling into any dusty attic spaces this time." Tyler grinned, recognizing the capitulation. "Deal. I want to check the old radio room in the basement first. Last Christmas I found a weird map in there, but we had to leave before I could really look at it." The radio room had been their grandfather's domain, a small concrete-walled space in the basement where he'd maintained his ham radio hobby until his death 3 years earlier. Margaret had left it largely untouched, a shrine to her late husband's passion. "Grandma might not want us poking around down there," Sophie cautioned. "She won't mind. She's busy catching up with Mom and Dad." Tyler was already heading down the hallway. "Come on!" Outside, thunder rumbled closer as the storm moved in. The old house creaked in response, as if communicating with the weather. Sophie followed her brother down the central staircase, their footsteps muffled by the worn carpet runner. The first-floor hallway led past the kitchen, where adult voices mingled with the clatter of dinner preparations, and toward a heavy wooden door that concealed the basement stairs. "Should we tell them where we're going?" Sophie asked. Tyler shook his head. "We'll be quick. Besides, we're just exploring, not leaving the house." The basement door opened with a protesting groan. Cool air wafted up, carrying the scent of concrete and something else, a metallic tang that reminded Sophie of pennies. Tyler flicked the light switch, illuminating a steep staircase that descended into the basement's dim expanse. "Ladies first," he grinned. "Yeah, right." Sophie pushed him gently ahead. "Age before beauty." They descended into the basement, footsteps echoing on the wooden stairs. Unlike the warm, lived-in spaces upstairs, the basement maintained a utilitarian coldness. Bare bulbs and metal cages cast pools of yellow light across concrete floors and cinder block walls. The space was divided into sections: laundry area, storage with rows of metal shelves, a workshop with grandfather's tools, and at the far end, the radio room. "This place always feels colder than it should," Sophie remarked, rubbing her arms. "That's because the foundation is original to the 1890s, Tyler replied with the confident expertise of a history enthusiast. "See how the walls curve there? That's where the old coal chute used to be." Thunder boomed directly overhead, rattling the small basement windows set high in the walls. The lights flickered momentarily. "Great," Sophie muttered. "All we need is to get trapped down here in the dark." "I brought a flashlight." Tyler patted his pocket. "Always be prepared." They made their way to the radio room, pushing open its metal door. Inside, their grandfather's equipment sat dust-covered but intact dial switches and meters frozen in time. A large world map dominated one wall, dotted with colored pins marking contacts he'd made across the globe. Beneath it sat his desk, still cluttered with notebooks and technical manuals. Tyler immediately went to a filing cabinet in the corner. The map was in here in a folder labeled Read Properties. "Why are you so interested in old maps?" Sophie asked, running a finger along the radio equipment. "Because this one showed tunnels," Tyler replied, rifling through folders, "like underneath this house and connecting to other buildings. I think Grandpa was mapping something secret." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "Tunnels, come on, Ty. That's straight out of your mystery books." I'm serious, it showed passages that aren't on any of the house blueprints. He pulled out a yellowed folder. Here it is. Before he could open it, a tremendous crack of thunder shook the house. The lights went out, completely plunging them into absolute darkness. Tyler! Sophie called, sudden fear tightening her throat. I'm here. His voice came from nearby, followed by the click and beam of his flashlight. Power's out. The flashlight created more shadows than illumination, transforming the familiar radio room into something alien. Rain now pounded against the small windows, a constant drumming that seemed to isolate them further from the world above. We should go back upstairs, Sophie suggested. Wait, look at this first. Tyler spread the map on the desk, holding the flashlight above it. Sophie leaned in curiosity, overcoming her unease. The map showed their grandmother's property, but with strange additions, dotted lines marking underground passages that seemed to originate from the basement. One line led toward the orchard, another toward the old barn, and a third toward the property line. See, Tyler whispered excitedly, tunnels, I bet they were used during Prohibition or something. Or it's just some theoretical project Grandpa never finished, Sophie countered, though she wasn't convinced by her own explanation. The map was too detailed with measurements and notations in their grandfather's precise handwriting. A door slammed somewhere in the basement, making them both jump. Kids, Margaret's voice called from the stairwell. Are you down here? The power's out and dinner's on hold. In the radio room, Grandma, Tyler called back hastily, folding the map and stuffing it into his pocket. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her own flashlight casting long shadows. There you are. I thought I might find you in Edward's old domain. She smiled, but her eyes lingered on the filing cabinet Tyler had been exploring. Find anything interesting? Just looking at Grandpa's radio stuff, Tyler replied a little too quickly. Margaret nodded slowly. Well, come upstairs. Your parents and I are setting up candles in the dining room, and we're having sandwiches instead of the roast I planned. As they followed their grandmother back through the basement, Sophie noticed how the flashlight beams skimmed across the cinder block walls, revealing patches of different textures. Newer blocks mixed with older ones, sections that seemed to have been repaired or replaced over the years. Has anyone ever found tunnels under the house, Grandma Barlow? Tyler asked suddenly. Margaret's step faltered for just a moment. Tunnels, what an imagination you have. This house has a standard foundation and basement. No secret passageways, I'm afraid. But what about Tyler? Sophie cut him off with a warning look. Something in their grandmother's tone suggested this wasn't a topic to pursue. Upstairs, the storm had transformed the house into a landscape of shadows and candlelight. Evelyn and Daniel had set up an impromptu picnic in the living room, spreading blankets on the floor and arranging sandwiches, chips, and drinks. Adventure already, huh? Daniel smiled as they entered. Power might be out till morning, according to the radio. Can we play hide and seek after dinner? Tyler asked, seamlessly shifting gears. The house is perfect for it right now. In the dark, Evelyn looked concerned. We all have flashlights, Tyler argued, and we know this house well enough. Please. I suppose that would be all right, Margaret conceded, as long as we establish some boundaries. Sophie expected her parents to object, but instead Daniel nodded. Sounds fun, actually. I haven't played hide and seek in years. I'll count first, Tyler volunteered eagerly. Up to 100. Ground rules, Margaret raised a finger. No hiding outside, no attic, and the basement is off limits. Tyler's face fell slightly at the basement restriction, but he nodded. Deal. They ate by candlelight, the storm continuing its assault outside. Sophie found herself enjoying the atmosphere despite the power outage. There was something cozy about huddling together while nature raged beyond the windows. After dinner, they cleared away the picnic and prepared for the game. I'll count in the living room, Tyler announced. Everyone gets 30 seconds to hide after I reach 100, then I'm coming to find you. Remember, no basement, Margaret reminded him, looking directly into his eyes. I know, Grandma. Tyler positioned himself in the corner of the living room, facing the wall. Ready, 1, 2, 3. The others scattered flashlights, bobbing as they sought hiding places. Sophie hesitated, then headed for the second floor. The blue room had a window seat with a hidden storage space beneath, not particularly original, but effective. She slipped inside, pulling the cushion down to cover the opening, leaving just enough space to breathe comfortably. From downstairs, she could hear Tyler's counting, growing louder as he approached 100. 98, 99, 100, ready or not, here I come. The house fell silent except for the storm and Tyler's deliberate footsteps as he began his search. Sophie regulated her breathing, amused at how the childhood game still triggered genuine excitement. She heard Tyler moving methodically through the first floor, opening closets and checking behind furniture. Minutes passed. The footsteps moved upstairs, getting closer to her room. Then unexpectedly, they descended again. She heard muffled voices, Tyler talking to someone, perhaps their father, after finding him. More footsteps, more searching. Time stretched on. Sophie began to feel cramped in the window seat. Surely everyone must have been found by now. She was considering revealing herself when she heard rapid footsteps approaching her room. The bedroom door burst open. "Sophie?" It was her mother's voice, tight with concern. Sophie pushed open the window seat. "You found me." Evelyn's face was pale in the flashlight beam. "Sophie, have you seen Tyler? Or your grandmother?" "No, I've been hiding. Isn't Tyler still seeking?" "We can't find him," Evelyn said, her voice cracking slightly. "Or Margaret. Your dad is checking outside, even though they were supposed to stay in the house." A chill that had nothing to do with the basement's coolness ran through Sophie. "Did you check the radio room?" Tyler was really interested in something he found there earlier. Daniel checked the entire basement. There's no sign of them. Evelyn's flashlight trembled in her hand. "We've looked everywhere. It's like they've vanished." Sophie followed her mother downstairs, where Daniel had just returned from checking the porch, in immediate yard rain dripping from his jacket. "Nothing," he reported. "And this weather, they couldn't have gone far in this." "Maybe they're playing a joke on us," Sophie suggested, but the words sounded hollow even to her. They searched the house again, systematically checking every room, closet, and possible hiding place. They called Tyler and Margaret's names until their voices grew hoarse. Outside, the storm continued, unabated lightning periodically illuminating the empty rooms in stark, white flashes. The basement again, Daniel decided, heading for the door. "We must have missed something." This time, Sophie joined her parents in descending the basement stairs. Their flashlight beams cut through the darkness, revealing the familiar laundry area, storage shelves, and workshop. The radio room door stood open exactly as they'd left it earlier. "Look," Daniel suddenly said, directing his flashlight toward the floor near the back wall. Muddy footprints traced a path across the concrete, small prints that could only belong to Tyler, alongside the distinctive pattern near Margaret's cane. They led to the cinder block wall at the far end of the basement, then simply stopped. "That's impossible," Evelyn whispered. "Where could they have gone?" Daniel ran his hands over the cinder blocks where the footprints ended. "This is solid. There's no door, no opening." Sophie remembered the map Tyler had shown her, the dotted lines indicating passages beneath the house. Could there actually be tunnels? And if so, how did you access them, Mom? "Dad," she began hesitantly. "Tyler found a map earlier showing tunnels under the property. I thought he was imagining things, but now—" Daniel turned to her sharply. "What kind of map? Where is it?" He put it in his pocket. It showed passages leading from the basement to other parts of the property. Daniel examined the wall again with renewed intensity, feeling along the joints between blocks, tapping for hollow sounds. "Nothing. This is solid masonry." "We need to call for help," Evelyn decided. "This isn't a game anymore." They tried the landline, but the storm had knocked out phone service along with the power. Cell phones still showed no signal. Daniel decided to drive to the nearest neighbor 2 miles down the road to call the sheriff. "Stay here with Sophie," he told Evelyn, "in case they come back." "Be careful." Evelyn clutched his arm. "The roads will be flooded." After Daniel left, Sophie and her mother continued searching, moving furniture, checking spaces they had already examined multiple times. The house seemed to mock their efforts, its old bones creaking in the wind, as if laughing at some private joke. Hours later, headlights cut through the rain-streaked windows. Daniel had returned with Sheriff Raymond Blake and 2 deputies. Blake was a barrel-chested man with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much tragedy in his rural jurisdiction. "Tell me exactly what happened," he directed, standing in the living room with his rain-slicked uniform dripping onto the hardwood floor. They recounted the evening's events, the power outage, the hide-and-seek game, the mysterious disappearance. Sophie described the map Tyler had found, watching as the sheriff's expression shifted from professional concern to something deeper. "Show me these footprints," he requested. In the basement, Sheriff Blake examined the muddy tracks with methodical attention, photographing them from multiple angles. His deputies spread out checking the walls with more sophisticated tools than Daniel had available. Nothing, one deputy reported. Ground-penetrating radar shows solid earth behind these blocks. That's impossible, Sophie insisted. They were just here and now they're gone. People don't just vanish. Sheriff Blake placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. We're going to find them, Miss Walker. But I need to ask, has your grandmother ever shown signs of confusion? Any unusual behavior? She's perfectly lucid, Evelyn answered sharply. She was a school principal until 5 years ago. Blake nodded. And your brother, any history of running away, problems at home or school? Absolutely not. Daniel's voice was tight with controlled anger. Tyler is a happy, well-adjusted kid who was excited to visit his grandmother. And these footprints show they were both here in this basement, and then he gestured helplessly at the wall. The sheriff sighed. I'm calling in additional resources. We'll have search dogs here at first light, and I'm requesting assistance from neighboring counties. If they're somewhere on this property, we'll find them. But they didn't. Days turned into weeks. The search expanded from the house to the entire 200-acre property. Cadaver dogs sniffed every inch of ground. Volunteer drones scanned cornfields and woodlots. Divers checked the pond at the back of the property. The county brought in structural engineers who examined the foundation and determined there were no hidden spaces or tunnels. Sheriff Blake maintained a command post in Margaret's living room, coordinates for search sectors marked on maps spread across her dining table. As July turned to August, the number of volunteers dwindled. The case featured briefly on regional news, then faded as other stories took precedence. Sophie watched her parents age before her eyes. Evelyn took a leave of absence from the hospital where she worked as a trauma nurse. Daniel grew silent, spending hours in the basement, staring at the wall where the footprints had ended, now preserved under evidence tape. I don't understand, he would mutter. They couldn't just disappear. Sophie found herself returning to the radio room, searching through her grandfather's files for the map Tyler had mentioned, but it was nowhere to be found. Had Tyler truly taken it with him, or had someone removed it afterward? 3 weeks after the disappearance, Sheriff Blake sat the family down in the living room. His face told them everything before he spoke. We're scaling back the search, he said gently. We've exhausted every resource, followed every protocol. The case remains open, but active searching will be reduced to periodic sweeps. You're giving up, Evelyn whispered. We're not giving up, Blake insisted. But I have to be honest with you, this is the most puzzling case I've encountered in 27 years of law enforcement. There's no evidence of forced entry, no signs of struggle, no indication they left the property, yet they're gone. What about the footprints? Daniel demanded. They led right to that wall. And stopped, Blake confirmed. Our analysts have no explanation for that. It's as if... He stopped himself. As if what? Sophie prompted. The sheriff shook his head. As if they vanished into thin air. I'm sorry, but that's where we stand right now. After the sheriff left, the house felt emptier than ever. Evelyn and Daniel discussed what to do next. They couldn't stay indefinitely. Jobs, their home in Detroit, the approaching school year all called them back. Yet leaving felt like abandonment. We'll come back every weekend, Daniel promised, and I'll hire a private investigator. I want to stay, Sophie announced. I can defer school for a semester. Absolutely not. Evelyn's voice was firm. I've lost my son and my mother-in-law. I won't risk you too. The night before they were scheduled to leave, Sophie crept down to the basement one last time. The evidence tape had been removed, the footprints documented and released from the crime scene. She stood where Tyler and Margaret had apparently vanished, pressing her hands against the cold cinder blocks. Where are you? She whispered. How did you just disappear? Only the house's settling creaks answered her. The years that followed blurred together for Sophie. Her parents maintained the farmhouse but couldn't bear to live in it. They rented it to a succession of tenants while continuing to work with private investigators. Each year on the anniversary of the disappearance, Sheriff Blake would call with the same message. The case remains open, but there are no new leads. Sophie graduated high school, then college, with a degree in computer science specializing in security systems, a choice influenced by her obsession with finding a technological explanation for what happened that night. She learned about hidden rooms, false walls, remote surveillance. She studied architectural anomalies and historical hiding places. Nothing provided answers. Margaret's house passed through several tenants, none staying longer than a year. Rumors spread that the place was haunted, that people heard children's laughter in empty rooms, that the basement lights turned on by themselves. 9 long years passed. In August 2021, the bank holding the mortgage on the property, neglected during the family's focus on the search, threatened foreclosure. Daniel and Evelyn, now living in Chicago, couldn't make the trip to Michigan to clear out the house. Sophie volunteered. "Are you sure?" Evelyn asked, concern lining her face, now showing premature signs of age. "That house holds nothing but pain for us." "I need to do this," Sophie insisted. "For Tyler, for Grandma. Maybe there's something we missed." At 25, Sophie Walker had grown into a quiet, determined woman. Her auburn hair was shorter now, practical for her work as a security consultant. She'd never stopped researching the disappearance, maintaining a detailed digital archive of every scrap of information about the case. The drive to the farmhouse felt surreal. 9 years had changed the landscape. Businesses closed, new developments sprouted, the rural character gradually giving way to suburban sprawl. Yet Margaret's property remained an island of the past, the Victorian structure looking older and more weather-beaten than Sophie remembered. The current tenants had moved out weeks earlier, leaving behind the usual detritus of hasty departures, forgotten furniture, trash bags, children's toys. Sophie parked in the overgrown driveway, feeling the weight of memories as she climbed the porch steps. The key still fit the lock, though it turned with reluctance, as if the house itself was wary of her return. Inside, dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight. The rooms were largely empty, the tenants' abandoned items clustered near the doors. Sophie moved through the first floor, methodically noting water damage in one corner of the living room, a cracked window in the kitchen. The house had not been well maintained. Upstairs, she paused at Tyler's old room. The map wallpaper had faded, the furniture long gone. In its place stood a cheap particle board desk and a broken lamp. She continued to her blue room, finding it transformed into a child's nursery with half-removed decals on the walls. The bank inspector was scheduled to arrive the next morning. Sophie had one night to assess what needed to be done before the property was surrendered. The most pressing task was shutting off the utilities, which meant visiting the basement, a space she'd avoided in her thoughts for years. As evening approached, Sophie steeled herself and opened the basement door. The wooden stairs creaked under her weight, each step bringing back flashes of that night, Tyler counting the storm, the footprints that led nowhere. At the bottom, she flicked the light switch, surprised when fluorescent tubes flickered to life overhead. At least the electricity still worked. The basement looked smaller than she remembered, cluttered with more abandoned items, boxes of broken bicycle bags of clothing. The wall where the footprints had ended was now partially obscured by a rusted metal shelving unit that hadn't been there 9 years ago. Sophie frowned. Someone had bolted the heavy shelves directly to the cinder blocks, an unusual choice for temporary storage. She made her way past the shelving toward the utility area where the circuit breaker and water heater were located. As she passed her cane, a recent necessity after a car accident last year, bumped against the shelving unit. The metal groaned and one of the brackets pulled slightly away from the wall. Sophie stopped examining the attachment point. The wood screws holding the bracket were severely rusted, far more deteriorated than they should be after just a few years. She poked at one with her cane tip, and to her surprise, it crumbled, shearing off completely. The entire shelf unit shifted, groaning outward on what appeared to be hinges. Sophie's heart thundered in her chest. With trembling hands, she pulled at the edge of the shelving unit. It swung further outward, revealing what had been hidden behind it, a doorway set into the cinder block wall, its oak frame dusty but unmistakable. Atop the lintel, a tarnished brass plate read, "Reed & Sons, 1894, Private Storage." Sophie stared in disbelief. 9 years of searching, of theories and investigations, and the answer had been here all along. A hidden door disguised as a blank wall, later concealed further by the strategically placed shelving unit. Beyond the doorway, a narrow passage descended into darkness, stone steps disappearing around a bend. From somewhere below, a faint amber light flickered as if a lantern had been left burning. Sophie reached for her phone to call Sheriff Blake, her fingers shaking so badly she could barely navigate to his contact. The call connected, but as soon as she spoke his name, it dissolved into static. She pulled the phone away, seeing no service flash across the screen. The concrete walls must be blocking the signal. She tried again with the same result, then turned back toward the stairs, intending to go outside where reception might be better. But as she turned, the shelving door suddenly swung shut with a decisive click, the latch engaging from the inside. Sophie froze, heart pounding in her throat. From the stairwell beyond the door came a sound that stopped her breath entirely, a child's voice, soft but unmistakable, counting in the familiar cadence of hide and seek. 98, 99, 100. Ready or not, here I come. Tyler's voice unchanged after 9 years. Sophie's shaky flashlight beam crawled down the narrow stairwell, revealing century-old cut stone walls that exhaled damp air, tasting of iron and motor oil. Halfway down, she found a frayed extension cord snaking from somewhere deeper, its orange jacket crusted with dust, yet still warm to the touch. The countdown she'd sworn she heard was gone now, replaced by the steady tick of a pull-chain clock mounted near the stair's end. Its hands were frozen at 7:14 p.m., the exact minute Sheriff Blake had logged Tyler and Margaret missing 9 years earlier. Despite every instinct screaming for her to turn back, Sophie descended the stairs. At the bottom, the passage leveled into a long chamber lined with wooden racks holding identical metal trunks, each stenciled MHC toolkit, and secured with modern combination locks. On the nearest trunk, a yellow post-it note curled at the edges. The handwriting was unmistakable, her Uncle Victor's looping script, though he had died 2 years before Tyler and Margaret vanished. The note read, "Sophie, call this number before opening, 517-555-0139. Sophie's phone suddenly buzzed to life in her hand, one bar of service, an incoming call from that exact number. Her thumb hovered over the accept button as knocks echoed from above, deliberate coded like a signal she should recognize. The screen flashed with a text message, "Answer if you want to see them again." Sophie's trembling thumb accepted the call. Before she could speak, a voice filtered through layered distortion, yet unmistakably Tyler's deeper, now steadier, tinged with urgency. "Soph, don't panic. You have opened the first door. We're alive, but you must play by the rules now." Part 2, Finding the Trail in 450 words. Sophie's breath caught in her throat as she clutched the phone tighter. "Tyler, is that really you? How?" "No questions yet," her brother's voice interrupted, still filtered through what sounded like multiple layers of distortion. "We don't have much time on this connection. Behind the second trunk on the left, you'll find a keypad. Enter my birthday, no dashes, then step back quickly. I rigged the fail attempt circuit with tear gas capsules, and I'd rather not blind you." The line remained open, ambient vent noise whispering through the speaker like a mechanical heartbeat. Sophie moved toward the second trunk, phone pressed to her ear, or struggling to process what was happening. Her brother, missing for 9 years, presumed dead by many, was somehow alive and communicating with her, and he seemed to know exactly where she was. "Tyler, are you in these tunnels? Is Grandma with you?" she whispered. "Later, Soph. Keypad first. 30 seconds before the line goes dead." Behind the trunk, just as Tyler had described, a small metal panel was flush mounted to the stone wall. A compact keypad glowed with soft blue digits. Sophie punched in show 5212003, May 21st, 2003, Tyler's birthday. The panel emitted a soft beep followed by a pneumatic hiss. A section of the wall slid laterally, revealing a rough limestone tunnel, lit by dimmer rope lights spiraling deeper beneath the farmhouse. "Good," Tyler's voice crackled. "Follow the chalk arrows. Each one is numbered. Go to marker 3. Tyler, please. We only have battery for another minute. These tunnels were built by Uncle Victor for his wartime radio experiments, later for other things. Mom and Dad never knew. After the storm 9 years ago, someone used them to take us from the house. We woke here, but Grandma and I leveraged Victor's old equipment to secure sections and lock ourselves in." Sophie started down the tunnel and following the first chalk arrow, marked with a crude 1 at its tip. "Are you trapped? Who took you?" "Great. Monarch Holdings," Tyler replied, using a name Sophie didn't recognize. "Uncle Victor's company after the rebrand. Today we forced the shelving screws to rust and snap with a drip feed we set up months ago. We knew the bank would send you to drain the pool. You planned this. You've been here for 9 years. Not by choice. Listen carefully. You need to shut down the external generator unit opposite the well room. It powers the locks holding us. Your cane, it has a pry bar tip, right? The accident last year." Sophie glanced down at her walking cane, stunned that Tyler somehow knew about her car accident. "Yes, but Use it to pop the louver panel on the generator and pull the red breaker. You'll have 80 seconds before backup kicks in. Then follow Arrow 3 to the freight dumbwaiter. We'll ride up. Tyler's voice wavered. Soph, Mom and Dad are alive too, but not here. Whoever ran this place sold them to another facility. I hacked one manifest. We think they're in Pennsylvania. First get us out and bring the ledger behind trunk 5. The line died. Sophie stared at her phone in disbelief, then looked up as heavy footsteps pounded on the floor above. The shelving door at the basement entrance clanged twice, followed by a muffled shout, male unfamiliar, cursing about a security breach. She pocketed the phone, adrenaline overriding the shock. Following the chalk arrows, she moved deeper into the tunnel system. The roughly hewn passageway occasionally intersected with more finished sections lined in concrete, suggesting different construction periods. At junction, 2 pipes and electrical conduits ran along the ceiling, feeding power deeper into the complex. Arrow 3 led to a cinder block alcove where a generator hummed steadily, its exhaust venting through a series of louver panels. Sophie wedged her cane tip into the panel edge and pulled. The metal cover popped free with surprising ease, revealing a complex electrical panel inside. The red breaker switch stood out among dozens of black ones labeled SECA locks in faded marker. Sophie hesitated, suddenly aware of the enormity of what she was doing. If Tyler was truly on the other side of these systems, she would be reuniting with her brother after 9 agonizing years. But what if this was an elaborate trap? What if the voice wasn't really Tyler? The pounding footsteps above grew louder. Someone was definitely searching the basement, and they didn't sound friendly. Decision made, Sophie yanked the red breaker down. The effect was immediate. Lights flickered to black, then emergency LEDs bathed the tunnel in blood-red glow. Alarms squealed from multiple directions. A hissing sound suggested pressurized systems releasing. Sophie retraced her steps, following Arrow 3 as it curved toward a section of wall that looked newer than the surrounding stone. The wall panel slid aside, revealing a freight dumbwaiter cage large enough to hold a person or two. The mechanism rattled to life, descending from somewhere above. Sophie watched heart hammering as the cage lowered into view. Inside were 2 silhouettes, lean and hunched against the sides of the cramped space. As the cage reached the bottom, emergency lighting illuminated the occupants. Sophie gasped. The young woman pressed against the left side was unmistakably her sister, but not the 16-year-old girl who had disappeared. This Sophie was 25 with shorter hair and harder eyes that had seen too much. The boy beside her had grown too, no longer 11, but a young man of 20, his face gaunt, but his eyes blazing with the same intelligence Sophie remembered. "Tyler, Grandma," she whispered, reaching for the cage door. "Hurry," Tyler urged, his voice now matching the deeper tones from the phone. "We have 60 seconds before the backup generator kicks in." Margaret remained silent, her once strong frame now frail hands trembling with the advanced arthritis. Her silver hair had thinned considerably, but her eyes still held the sharp determination Sophie remembered. "Up or down, Sophie?" Tyler asked urgently. "Next 80 seconds, decide if we surface or disappear forever. The lift is loud, they'll hear us." From the stairwell echoed the clatter of the shelving hinges and a man's barked order. "Seal Block A, they're in the pit." Margaret gripped the cage rail, eyes blazing. "Not today," she muttered, slamming the UP button herself. The dumbwaiter screeched through brick and timber, each clank echoing like a countdown. Tyler thrust a grease-smudged flash drive into Sophie's hand. "Ledger copy," he hissed while simultaneously prying up a floorboard inside the rattling cage and yanking out a fuse cluster. Sparks spat as the lift jolted, then hissed to a halt behind what appeared to be an old coal chute door 1 level shy of the kitchen. Tyler wrestled with the slide bolt. Stale flour dust burst outward as the 3 tumbled into what Sophie recognized as a broom closet off the pantry, a space that had seemed perfectly ordinary during her childhood. "Lock it," Tyler instructed, and Sophie levered the hidden channel shut just as a flashlight beam swept across the cage below. From inside the dim closet, Tyler unrolled a blueprint torn from what appeared to be their Uncle Victor's radio plans. Secret crawl spaces and passages were marked between walls, annotated with erasable grease pencil. "Guard rotation is 3-man carbine stun wand K9, he murmured, erasing and redrawing paths. "They'll secure the basement first, then sweep up." "Who are they?" Sophie whispered. "Tyler, what the hell is going on?" "Monarch holding security," Margaret answered, her voice raspy from disuse. "Victor's company, after he restructured." They're not just security, they're traffickers. Tyler cracked the pantry lath with a small crowbar extracted from his boot, a quiet, deliberate movement that suggested years of practice. He peered into the kitchen, then pulled back. Two men in tactical, soft armor, he reported, flashlights muttering about a manifest drive. The taller one has a stun wand. They're searching drawers. Sophie was struggling to comprehend the situation. You've been here all this time, in tunnels under the house. Not just us, Margaret whispered. Others too. This place is one node in a network. They take people with specific skills, technical knowledge. Later, Tyler cut her off. Movement plan first. He tapped Sophie's cane head to the floor 3 staccato knocks. Somewhere underfoot, the water heater kicked on, masking the sound of their whispers. We need to reach the outside radio transmitter, Tyler explained. I've modified it to broadcast on emergency frequencies, but we need line of sight to towers. The sheriff, Sophie said suddenly. Raymond Blake. He never stopped looking. If we can contact him. Blake was compromised, Margaret interrupted. Not willingly, but pressured. His deputy Morrison works for them. Jake Morrison. Sophie felt another shock. Jake had been part of the original investigation, always sympathetic, checking in with the family over the years. Trust no one in local law enforcement, Tyler warned. We need to get to the federal level, FBI, Homeland Security. He outlined a path through the house's hidden crawl spaces, narrow passages between walls that had been part of the original 1890s construction, but expanded by Victor Reed decades later. The plan was to reach the north side of the property where a transmitter was concealed in an old well house. When we hear them enter the pantry, we move, Tyler instructed. Sophie, you lead with the cane. Grandma and I will follow. Stop at any junction and wait for my tap code. The wait was excruciating. Sophie had 1,000 questions burning in her mind, but this wasn't the time. Instead, she studied her brother and grandmother in the dim light filtering through pantry slats. Both were thin to the point of gauntness, their skin pale from years underground. Yet there was a hardness to them, a survivor's resilience evident in their measured movements and watchful eyes. Tyler had grown into a young man with none of the awkwardness that usually accompanied adolescence. His movements were precise, economical. Margaret, despite her advanced arthritis, maintained the alert posture Sophie remembered, though pain clearly etched her features. Boots thumped in the hallway approaching the kitchen. Tyler held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. As the pantry door creaked open, he pressed a section of baseboard. A narrow panel slid silently, revealing a crawlspace entrance barely wide enough for an adult. Sophie went first, her slim frame slipping into the dark passage. Margaret followed with surprising agility, then Tyler, who sealed the entrance behind them. The space smelled of mouse droppings and ancient pine dust, with exposed joists pressing close overhead. They crawled forward on hands and knees, guided by Tyler's penlight, its beam muffled by a red filter. The house's infrastructure surrounded them, water pipes, old knob and tube wiring, mixed with newer electrical lines heating ducts. Tyler navigated with confidence, tapping Sophie's ankle when they needed to turn. At each junction, he paused to listen, sometimes consulting a small device that resembled a modified stethoscope. They emerged beside the furnace in what had once been the coal room, now repurposed as additional storage. Through gaps in the slat walls, Sophie could see the basement's main area where guards were prying open trunk 5. The leather ledger they extracted was thick as a phone book, its pages filled with columns of writing. Monarch Holdings transfer manifest, Tyler whispered. Every person they have taken where they were sent what skills they have. Mom and Dad are in their Pennsylvania facility, SB7. Sophie pulled out her phone, but Tyler immediately pushed it down. No signals. They have scanners. From above, Boots thumped toward the basement stairs. "2RES," a radio squawked. "Unit 3, Block A secure. Sweep generator lines." "Lines down," Tyler whispered. "They'll reboot power in 60. We need Victor's egress." He yanked a fuse blade from a junction box, plunging the nearby section into darkness. When he flicked on his red LED penlight again, Sophie was startled to see glowing green arrows appear on the joists, luminescent paint invisible to the naked eye, but revealed under the filtered light. They followed the arrow trail into what had been Victor's ham radio bunker, now transformed into a sophisticated communications hub with equipment far newer than what Sophie remembered from childhood. Tyler flipped open a small metal door in the floor, revealing a rusted gravity chute once used for coal delivery, now rigged with a rope ladder leading to what appeared to be a root cellar 20 feet below. Down, Tyler ordered. Fast. Sophie went first, then Margaret. As Tyler began his descent, the generator roared back to life. Basement fluorescence popped on, accompanied by shouts of, "Contact!" Bullets thunked into joists above. Tyler sliced the rope with a pocket knife after landing, and the chute door slammed as boots hit the trap above. The root cellar was musty, but ventilated with a small oval window opening to the orchard. Tyler consulted a notebook where escape routes were meticulously mapped. Cross the orchard, follow the drainage ditch 2 blocks to the decommissioned rail spur, he instructed. I stashed a vehicle there during our staged shelf rust breakout plan. You've been planning this for how long? Sophie asked, incredulous. 3 years, Margaret answered. Ever since Tyler hacked into their communication system and we learned your parents were still alive. Tyler boosted Margaret through the window first, then Sophie before squeezing through himself. Outside, the night air felt shockingly fresh after the tunnel's stale atmosphere. The farmhouse loomed behind them, its windows now blazing with light as the search intensified. They sprinted across the moonlit orchard, Sophie supporting Margaret, when the older woman's strength faltered. At the property line, Tyler stopped to fire what looked like a flare gun into the orchard canopy. Instead of a standard flare, it emitted a pattern of red sparks. Signal to our ally, he explained. Dirk Miller, retired postmaster. He's been watching for years, waiting for this moment. Sure enough, an ATV engine roared to life somewhere down the road, heading their way. Behind them, floodlights swept the farmhouse grounds as guards poured out. One released what was unmistakably a tracking dog. They'll chase the ledger and drive, Margaret said, patting her cardigan, where Sophie could now see the outline of papers taped to the older woman's ribs. This goes to the FBI first, then Homeland. The ATV skidded to a stop beside them. Dirk Miller, a man Sophie vaguely remembered from childhood, now in his 70s, but still sturdy. He tossed them helmets without a word, clearly rehearsed for this moment. As they sped toward the rail spur, Sophie glanced back to see distant flashlight beams searching the orchard. The farmhouse was now surrounded by vehicles with subdued lighting, not police cruisers, but unmarked SUVs with tinted windows. 9 years, she said, the reality still sinking in. You've been trapped under that house for 9 years. Not just trapped, Tyler called over the engine and noise. Fighting back, building systems, gathering evidence. The ATV delivered them to a derelict rail spur where a tarp-covered vehicle waited in the moonlight. Tyler pulled back the covering to reveal a rusted 1987 GMC pickup truck, ancient but serviceable. He slid behind the wheel with practiced ease. You can drive? Sophie asked, surprised. Practiced in bunker alleys, he replied with a half-smile. Get in. Dirk hefted Margaret into the cab while Sophie climbed into the passenger seat. The old man slapped the tailgate twice, then retreated to his ATV. He'll run interference if they follow, Tyler explained, starting the engine. We have a 20-minute head start at most. They drove with headlights off, following the weed-covered track until it merged with a timber line road. Only then did Tyler switch on the lights and accelerate, gravel pinging against the undercarriage. We need to call someone we can trust, Sophie said, pulling out her phone. Federal authorities, not local. There's a burner phone under your seat, Tyler directed. SIM swapped, anonymous. Call Sheriff Blake's personal number, not the station. But you said he was compromised. He was pressured, not turned on, Margaret clarified from between them. His daughter needed expensive medical care. They leveraged that, but he's been sending coded messages in the case files for years. He wants to help, but couldn't move openly. Sophie retrieved the phone and dialed Blake's number, which she still knew by heart after years of updates on the cold case. It rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. Blake. Sheriff, it's Sophie Walker. A pause. Sophie, what's wrong? I found them, Tyler and Grandma. They're alive. Another longer pause. When Blake spoke again, his voice was tightly controlled. Where are you? Heading east on Timberline Road. We have evidence of a trafficking operation run through Monarch Holdings. My parents are being held at a facility in Pennsylvania. Monarch Christ, Blake muttered. I've been looking into them for years. Sophie listened carefully. Don't come to the station. Jake Morrison is... We know, she interrupted. Tyler says you've been leaving coded messages in the case files. A sharp intake of breath. Your brother's that good. Never mind, meet me at Millersville's decommissioned grain silo. Only place without CCTV I still trust. I'm calling Deputy Engels, she's clean. She'll set rolling roadblocks. I'll instruct State Patrol to treat any unmarked SUV or black van as felony suspects. ETA 15 minutes, Tyler said loud enough to be heard. I'll be there, Blake promised, and hung up. Half a mile ahead, a single taillight flickered in a hedgerow, Dirk's wife idling in her Subaru to run escort. She slotted in front, hazards flashing, mimicking a farm vehicle to confuse overhead surveillance. As the impromptu convoy approached County J Bridge, two black SUVs shot from a field track, LED light bars blazing. Tyler floored the accelerator. The pickup's old V8 engine howled in protest, but its rear wheels fishtailed on the damp planking. One SUV drew parallel its passenger window, lowering to reveal a weapon, not a gun, but some kind of launcher. A beanbag round shattered the side mirror, plastic pellets clattering inside the cab. From seemingly nowhere, a shotgun blast erupted, Dirk hidden in the pickup bed firing rock salt from a 12-gauge. The SUV jerked away, overcorrected, and clipped the guardrail before spinning out in a shower of sparks. The second pursuer backed off, maintaining distance but staying on their tail. They want the ledger intact, Margaret explained, pulling the duct tape bundle from beneath her cardigan. If they grab any of us, they won't pat down an elderly woman first. Sophie glanced at her grandmother with newfound respect. The frail exterior masked a tactical mind that had clearly been instrumental in their survival. They roared into Millersville's ghost town district, boarded storefronts glaring in the high beams. Deputy Engels's cruiser idled beside the grain silo trunk, open as a decoy. Tyler skidded behind it. Sheriff Raymond Blake stood waiting, shotgun across his hip, waving them into the yawning loading dock, where tarps and hay bales formed a makeshift blast wall. The second SUV overshot the turn, spotted the angled flashing blues of patrol cars, and bolted south. Police cruisers gave chase sirens, shredding the night's quiet. Blake hustled them up a spiral stairwell to the silo's control loft, triple latching steel shutters behind them. Inside, he lifted a floor hatch to reveal a county fiber drop, a secure internet connection, bypassing standard telecom routes. Victor Reed installed this decades ago under civil defense funding, Blake explained, powering up a rugged laptop. Been maintaining it off books ever since. We have about 30 minutes before Monarch realizes this is a blind spot in their coverage. He connected a secure call to someone identified only as Arlene Pham, DOJ cyber liaison. Her stern face appeared on screen, lines of concern deepening as Blake quickly explained the situation. "Show me what you've got," she directed. Margaret spread the ledger on a workbench while Sophie inserted Tyler's flash drive into the laptop. The screen filled with columns of data names, dates, skill designations, and two-letter state codes with facility numbers. "Our parents are listed here," Sophie pointed to a line marked Walker E&D with PASB7 beside it. "Evelyn's a trauma nurse, Daniel's a structural engineer." Arlene's fingers flew across her keyboard. Cross-matching SB7 to property records. Got it. Abandoned silk mill basement in Bethlehem purchased by a shell corporation traced to Monarch Holdings 3 years ago. Power consumption spiked last month. Blake leaned forward. "How fast can you get a warrant?" "Already filing," Arlene replied. "Secretary approved emergency protocol 4 minutes ago. FBI HRT is spinning up in Philly State Police, securing perimeter. ETA to breach is 90 minutes. Outside, rotor thumps signaled the arrival of state police helicopters, their spotlights sweeping rooftops for the second SUV. "What about us?" Sophie asked. "We have the original ledger and Tyler knows their systems. You ride in my cruiser to the federal safe house," Blake decided. "Homeland Security takes over at daylight." He keyed his radio. "Secure route Delta to Lansing Field." Tyler pocketed the flash drive, fingers still trembling slightly from the adrenaline of the bridge chase. Margaret rose the bulky ledger, creating an unusual silhouette beneath her cardigan. 9 years of hide-and-seek ends tonight," she said, voice steely with determination. "Let's make the next move the last." As they descended the stairs, Sophie found herself between her grandmother and brother family members she'd mourned for nearly a decade now, fiercely alive and fighting. The cruiser's engine growled outside headlights, slicing through silo dust as dawn hinted at the horizon. "There's something you should know," Tyler said quietly as they reached the bottom. Monarch isn't just trafficking people for labor or technical skills. They're running experiments, long-term isolation effects, cognitive development under stress. Uncle Victor designed the system for DARPA, originally legitimate research. After he died, the new board took it underground, literally. How many people are in these facilities? Sophie asked, horrified. Hundreds, maybe thousands, Margaret answered. The ledger lists 42 sites across 17 states. And Victor's partner, Albert Crowthorne, is still running the operation. He's the one we need to bring down. Sheriff Blake opened the cruiser's rear door. We need to move. Morrison will figure out I've gone off script any minute. As they settled into the vehicle, Blake's radio crackled with urgent traffic, roadblocks, helicopter, coordinates, tactical channels, alive with the largest law enforcement operation the county had seen in decades. In the east, the sky lightened to pearl gray, promising a new day. Tyler leaned close to Sophie. After all this time, I never stopped believing you'd find us, he whispered, even when the others gave up. Others? Sophie asked. How many were in the tunnels with you? Before Tyler could answer, Blake's police radio erupted with static, then a familiar voice cut through Jake Morrison's. All units be advised, Sheriff Blake is considered armed and dangerous, possibly coerced by suspects. Approach with extreme caution. Repeat, Blake is compromised. Blake slammed his palm against the steering wheel. Damn it, they're faster than I thought. He accelerated onto the county road lights and sirens activated. New plan, we head straight for the National Guard airstrip. DOJ will have assets waiting. Sophie glanced at Tyler, seeing her own determination reflected in his eyes. After 9 years in darkness, her brother was racing toward daylight, the stolen ledger clutched to Margaret's chest like a shield. And somewhere in Pennsylvania, a similar dawn approached for their parents. The cruiser sped east, outrunning shadows as the first golden rays of sun spilled across Michigan farmland. Behind them, the old farmhouse with its secret passages and hidden horrors receded, but the network it concealed stretched far beyond county lines, so a web they had only begun to unravel. How does this end? Sophie asked, watching Tyler scan the horizon with the hyper-vigilance of someone accustomed to threats from all directions. It ends, Margaret said firmly, when every door is opened, every victim freed, and every name in this ledger gets justice. Blake nodded grimly as he pushed the cruiser faster. Then let's make sure this evidence reaches the right hands. He adjusted his rear-view mirror, catching a glimpse of distant headlights gaining ground. Because Monarch is coming for it, and they're not playing hide-and-seek anymore. Part 3, the search expands for 4,300 words. Dawn painted golden streaks across the runway as Sheriff Blake's cruiser skidded to a halt on the National Guard airstrip's tarmac. A sleek black DHS Blackhawk weighted rotors already spinning, kicking up dust devils that swirled in the morning light. 2 agents in tactical gear motioned urgently for them to approach. Department of Homeland Security Special Response Team, the lead agent shouted over the rotor wash as they exited the vehicle. I'm Agent Samantha Reeves. You're the Reed Walker party. Blake nodded, ushering Sophie, Tyler, and Margaret toward the helicopter. Morrison's mobilized county resources against us. ETA 10 minutes. Then we're wheels up in 5, Reeves replied, helping Margaret into the aircraft. FBI team is already en route to the Pennsylvania location. We'll rendezvous at the staging area. Sophie climbed aboard, followed by Tyler, who hesitated at the doorway, looking back at the sprawling farmland with an expression caught between relief and disbelief. After 9 years underground, the open sky seemed to overwhelm him momentarily. It's okay, Sophie reassured him, taking his hand. We're getting out. Inside the helicopter, Agent Reeves secured them with harnesses while her partner distributed communication headsets. Blake started to board when his radio crackled. He paused, listening to the transmission, then turned to Sophie with grim determination. I need to stay behind, he announced. Draw Morrison away from your trail. Reeves will get you to safety. Sheriff, Sophie began to protest. 9 years, Sophie, Blake cut her off. 9 years I've been playing both sides, trying to find answers without tipping my hand. Let me finish this part. Before she could argue further, Blake slammed the helicopter door and sprinted back to his cruiser. Through the window, Sophie watched him spin the vehicle around and speed back toward the access road, just as distant headlights appeared on the horizon. The Blackhawk lifted off, banking sharply east as the first unmarked SUVs reached the airstrip. Through her headset, Sophie heard Reeves confirm their departure with someone codenamed Quartermaster. Package secure airborne with full documentation. Requesting federal protection for local asset Blake Raymond J. Copy that, a crisp voice responded. State police deploying to his last known. What's the status of the ledger? Margaret patted her cardigan where the book remained secured. Intact, she said into her microphone, and I can authenticate every page. The helicopter gained altitude, the Michigan landscape spreading below them. Patchwork farms, morning mist clinging to River Valley's roads like silver threads connecting small communities. Sophie found herself struggling to process the rapid shift in reality. Yesterday, she'd been a security consultant, still haunted by her family's disappearance. Today, she was in a government helicopter with her long-missing brother and grandmother racing to rescue her parents from a human trafficking network. Tyler, she said, turning to her brother, I need to understand what happened. All of it. Tyler nodded, his face gaunt in the harsh morning light. He looked simultaneously older and younger than his 20 years, physically mature, but with shadows of the trauma that had stolen his adolescence. The night we disappeared, he began, voice steady despite the subject matter. We found more than just maps in Grandpa's radio room. We discovered files about Uncle Victor's company and something called Project Genesis. When the power went out, Grandma came looking for us, but someone else was already in the basement, men in tactical gear. They activated the hidden door when they realized we'd seen the files. They took us through the tunnels, Margaret continued, her arthritic hands clasped tightly in her lap. Used some kind of sedative gas. We woke up in what they called Holding Block A, a bunker system. Built beneath the original basement, Victor had constructed it decades earlier, supposedly for civil defense research. But it wasn't civil defense, Tyler added. It was a prototype for long-term human containment. Monarch Holdings was studying isolation effects, stress responses, skill retention under pressure. They needed test subjects with specific attributes. I was chosen for my pattern recognition abilities. Grandma for her administrative experience. And Mom and Dad, Sophie asked, dreading the answer. Medical expertise and structural engineering, Margaret replied. They were separated from us, immediately transferred to another facility. We only learned they were alive 3 years ago when Tyler managed to hack into the communication system. Agent Reeves, who had been listening silently, leaned forward. The ledger you recovered, it documents all these transfers. Tyler nodded. Every person, their skills where they were sent. It's coded, but I cracked their substitution cipher. The facilities are identified by state abbreviations and numbers. Mom and Dad are at PASB7, the silk mill basement in Bethlehem. How did you survive for 9 years? Sophie asked, still struggling to comprehend the timeline. We weren't alone at first, Margaret explained. There were others in Block A, a computer programmer from Ann Arbor, a structural engineer from Lansing. They took people with technical skills specialists who wouldn't be immediately missed or whose disappearances could be explained away. But they underestimated us, Tyler continued with a hint of pride. Grandma was a school principal for 30 years. She organized us, and I was good with systems, getting better every day. We started small, redirecting air circulation, manipulating the automated food delivery, creating blind spots in their surveillance. The real breakthrough came when one of the guards got sloppy, Margaret said, left a tablet inside the observation room. Tyler accessed their network, began gathering intelligence. We realized they moved people regularly between facilities, Tyler explained, testing different groupings, different stress factors. When they scheduled us for transfer last year, we decided to make our move, but needed to ensure you'd be there to find us. So you triggered the foreclosure, Sophie realized, knowing I'd be sent to inspect the property. We sabotaged just enough systems to devalue the property without raising suspicions, Margaret confirmed. The bank was already looking for a reason to call in the loan. The helicopter banked north, beginning its approach to what appeared to be a military installation near the Pennsylvania border. Below, a convoy of vehicles with federal markings converged on the landing zone. One thing I don't understand, Sophie said. If you could hack their systems, why not call for help sooner? Alert authorities. Tyler's expression darkened. Their network was isolated, no external connections. And they had contingencies, dead man switches. If certain protocols weren't followed, other facilities would eliminate evidence. The implication hung heavy in the helicopter's cabin. Sophie understood her brother and grandmother had been walking a tightrope, gathering intelligence, while ensuring they didn't trigger a purge that could kill their parents or other captives. "We're landing at Camp Haverson," Agent Reeves announced as the helicopter descended. "FBI hostage rescue team is assembling for the Bethlehem operation. They'll want to debrief you immediately." The Black Hawk touched down on a concrete pad surrounded by temporary structures, command tents, communications arrays, and vehicles with various federal markings. As they disembarked, Sophie noted the heightened security and armed personnel at perimeter positions, counter-drone equipment on rooftops, satellite uplinks being established. They were escorted to a large command tent where a bustling operation was already underway. Digital displays showed building schematics, thermal imaging of the Bethlehem site, and personnel deployments. At the center stood a gray-haired man with the unmistakable bearing of senior leadership. "Director Marquez, FBI Critical Incident Response," Agent Reeves introduced him. "Sir, these are the walkers and Miss Reed, as well as the documentation we discussed." Marquez nodded briskly. "We've got a situation developing rapidly. Ms. Walker, we need your brother's expertise on the Bethlehem facility layout immediately." Tyler stepped forward without hesitation. "You have blueprints, architectural plans from county records." Marquez confirmed, leading them to a table where satellite imagery was overlaid with structural diagrams. "But nothing showing the subsurface modifications you described." Tyler studied the images, then grabbed a marker and began annotating the plans with remarkable precision. "The original boiler room has been converted to security headquarters. Access to the sublevels is through this freight elevator, but it's been modified with biometric locks. Alternative entry point here. Maintenance shaft running alongside the original chimney stack. Thermal imaging shows at least 8 heat signatures below grade, an analyst reported from a nearby station. 4 appear to be stationary, possibly restrained." "That would match the manifest," Tyler confirmed. 4 specialized captives, 2 guard rotations, and probably a facility manager. Margaret approached carefully, removing the ledger from beneath her cardigan. "The transfer records indicate this facility specializes in medical and engineering subjects. My son and daughter-in-law should be among those held there." Director Marquez assigned 2 analysts to begin processing the ledger, while Tyler continued detailing the facility's likely security measures. Sophie watched her brother with growing amazement. His understanding of Monarch systems was comprehensive, his tactical suggestions precise. The shy 11-year-old boy had become a formidable intelligence asset. "HRT is on final approach to Bethlehem," a communications officer announced, requesting final authorization. Marquez looked to Tyler. "Anything else they should know?" "Tell them to cut external power before breaching," Tyler advised. "The backup generators take 30 seconds to engage, during which all electronic locks default to open. And warn them about the dead man's switches. If the facility manager feels cornered, he might activate a purge protocol." Marquez relayed the instructions, then turned to Sophie. "We're monitoring the operation via secure uplink. You and your family are welcome to observe from the adjacent tent, but I need your brother here to advise the tactical team." Sophie nodded, understanding the need to separate emotional family members from operational decisions. She and Margaret were escorted to a smaller tent equipped with monitors showing the same feeds as the command center. A young agent provided them with coffee and energy bars, the first real food Margaret had seen in years, Sophie realized with a pang. "Do you think they're really there?" Sophie asked quietly as they watched the operation unfold on screen. "Mom and Dad." Margaret reached for her hand. "The records have been accurate so far, and Tyler confirmed their presence through system logs 3 months ago. But Sophie," she hesitated, "we need to prepare ourselves. 9 years in these facilities changes people. Your parents may not be as you remember them." The warning settled heavily in Sophie's chest as she focused on the monitors. The FBI team had reached the Bethlehem mill, establishing a perimeter while thermal imaging drones mapped heat signatures through the stone walls. On the main screen, the HRT commander, identified as Special Agent Kovac, was receiving final instructions. "Primary objective is recovery of all live captives." Marquez's voice came through the speakers. "Secondary is preservation of evidence. Technical advisor indicates possible self-destruct mechanisms. Proceed with extreme caution." "Copy that," Kovac replied. "Initiating power cut in 3, 2, 1. The thermal imaging feeds flickered as the mill's electricity was severed. Immediately, the tactical team moved in, breaching the boiler room doors with specialized equipment. Gunfire erupted from catwalk security personnel who had anticipated the attack. Sophie watched heart in her throat as the HRT operators methodically cleared the upper levels, working their way toward the freight elevator Tyler had identified. Below grade, the heat signatures were moving now, guards responding to the breach, captives reacting to the commotion. "Stairwell hot," barked one of the operators through the comm system, taking fire from below. More gunfire flashbangs detonating in confined spaces. Then stairwell clear, proceeding to sub-level. The team reached the freighted elevator, finding it locked down, despite the power cut, a mechanical failsafe Tyler hadn't anticipated. They deployed a snake cam between the doors, transmitting grainy footage to the command center. "We have visual on captives," Kovac reported. 4 individuals restrained to medical gurneys. 2 appear conscious, responsive. Sophie leaned forward, straining to see details in the low-resolution feed. The camera panned across the underground facility, revealing a clinical space with medical equipment, monitoring stations, and the 4 gurneys positioned in the center. "Can you identify any of the captives?" Marquez asked. The camera zoomed on the first gurney, a thin woman with graying auburn hair, face gaunt but unmistakable, Evelyn Walker, Sophie's mother. "Mom," Sophie whispered, reaching instinctively toward the screen. The camera shifted to the adjacent gurney. Daniel Walker lay there, oxygen mask covering part of his face, but his eyes were open, alert. 9 years older, considerably thinner, but alive. "Both parents confirmed," Kovac stated. 2 additional captives, male approximately 60 years old, female approximately 40. Proceeding with entry. The breaching team cut through the elevator doors, deploying flashbangs to disorient the remaining guards. One security officer raised what looked like a taser toward the captives, but the camera caught a remarkable sight. Evelyn Walker, despite her restraints, managed to jam her IV pole into the guard's knee. The distraction gave the entry team the seconds they needed to neutralize the threat. "Facility secure," Kovac announced moments later. "All captives alive. Medical team required for assessment." Sophie felt Margaret's hand tighten around hers as they watched medics rush into the facility. The camera followed them as they released the restraints, performed initial evaluations, and prepared the captives for transport. Sophie, Agent Reeves appeared at the tent entrance. "Director Marquez thought you might want to speak with your parents. We've established a video link." Sophie stood on shaky legs, Margaret rising beside her. They followed Reeves back to the command center where Tyler was already seated before a secure terminal, a video feed connecting to the Bethlehem site. On screen, Evelyn and Daniel Walker sat side by side on a medical transport gurney, blankets around their shoulders, medical personnel hovering nearby. "Mom, Dad," Sophie's voice broke as she sat beside Tyler. "Sophie," Evelyn's face crumpled with emotion. "Oh my God, Sophie, is that really you?" "It's me, Mom, and Tyler's here, and Grandma." "Margaret," Daniel leaned forward, disbelief etched on his haggard face. "You're all together, you're all safe." "We're safe, son," Margaret confirmed, moving into frame. "And now so are you." For several moments, the family simply stared at each other through the video link, absorbing the reality of reunion after 9 impossible years. Evelyn looked older than her 52 years, her once vibrant auburn hair now streaked with gray, her face lined with the strain of prolonged captivity. Daniel's beard was shot through with white, his former robust frame now leaned to the point of gauntness. But their eyes were still the same, bright with intelligence and now brimming with tears. "What did they do to you?" Sophie finally asked the question she had been dreading. "Medical research." Evelyn answered, her professional demeanor asserting itself despite the circumstances. "They wanted my trauma treatment protocols, adapting them for prolonged isolation scenarios. Daniel's expertise in structural reinforcement was used for their facility designs." "Were you hurt?" Tyler asked carefully. "Not physically, not deliberately," Daniel clarified. "They needed us functional, but the psychological toll..." He trailed off, glancing at Evelyn. "They separated us for months at a time, used isolation as both punishment and experimental condition." "The others here," Evelyn continued, "Lisa Chen, a neurologist from Johns Hopkins, and Robert Garrett, an HVAC engineer from Ohio. They've been here longer than we have." Director Tyler turned to Marquez, who was monitoring the exchange. "The ledger lists at least 41 other facilities. With what we've learned from this one, we could coordinate simultaneous raids." Marquez nodded. "Already in motion." DOJ has approved a nationwide operation based on your intelligence. Teams are assembling for coordinated breaches of the 17 sites we've positively identified so far. What about the leadership? Margaret asked. Albert Crowthorne, the board members. As long as they're free, they'll destroy evidence. We've secured warrants for the entire Monarch Holdings executive team, Marquez assured her. FBI is moving on their headquarters in Chicago as we speak. On screen, a medic approached Evelyn and Daniel indicating they needed to prepare for transport. Sophie felt a surge of panic at the thought of losing sight of her parents so soon after finding them. Where are they taking you, she asked. Secure medical facility in Quantico, Agent Reeves explained. You'll all be reunited there after debriefing. We need to keep you protected until all Monarch assets are neutralized. One moment, Evelyn requested, as the medics prepared to end the call. Sophie, Tyler, Margaret, I need you to know. We never stopped trying to escape, never stopped thinking about you. Every day we looked for ways to leave messages, create breadcrumbs. We know, Mom, Tyler assured her. Your maintenance request patterns, I found them in the system logs. 3 taps for S7 for G. Sophie's good. That's how I knew she'd come back to the house eventually. Daniel smiled weakly. Always the clever one, Tyler. And Sophie, you found them. You brought everyone home. We're not home yet, Sophie replied, her resolve strengthening. But we will be, soon. The video link ended as the medical team moved Evelyn and Daniel to the waiting transport. Sophie sat back processing the brief reunion, her parents alive, but changed survivors of an ordeal she was only beginning to comprehend. They seem remarkably functional, she observed to Tyler, after 9 years of captivity. Mom's medical training, Tyler reasoned, and Dad's always been adaptable. But you heard them, the psychological impact will be significant. Recovery won't be simple. Director Marquez approached their terminal tablet in hand. We've begun processing the ledger data. Initial cross-referencing confirms at least 94 individuals currently held in Monarch facilities nationwide. Another 36 marked as transferred to external partners, possibly international. International? Margaret's eyes widened. Victor's operation extended beyond borders. We've identified connections to organizations in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia, Marquez confirmed. Interpol has been notified. An analyst hurried over, expression urgent. Sir, Chicago team reports Monarch headquarters has been evacuated. Evidence of document destruction in progress. Marquez cursed under his breath. How long ago? Unknown, but security footage shows executives departing approximately 3 hours ago. Primary target Crowthorne is not among them. Tyler straightened. Check the private airfields. Monarch maintains a Gulfstream at Aurora Municipal. The analyst hurried away to relay the information. Marquez turned to Sophie and her family. We need to accelerate the operation timeline. The leadership is clearly aware we're moving against them. How? Sophie asked. How could they know so quickly? Insiders, Margaret suggested grimly. The ledger showed connections to law enforcement, even some federal agencies. They've had years to plant people. Marquez nodded. All the more reason to get you to Quantico immediately. Agent Reeves will escort you to the transport. As they prepared to depart, Tyler approached one of the digital displays showing the nationwide map of Monarch facilities. His expression was troubled as he studied the pattern of locations. What is it? Sophie asked, joining him. This distribution, he pointed to clusters of sites in the Midwest and along the eastern seaboard. It's not random. They're positioned near key infrastructure, power grids, water treatment, transportation hubs. You think there's more to this than human trafficking and research? Tyler nodded slowly. In the files I accessed, there were references to something called Phase 2, deployment of assets to strategic positions. I thought they meant placing their personnel in influential roles, but what if the people themselves are the assets? Sophie finished the thought. Trained or conditioned during captivity, then released to serve some larger purpose. Before Tyler could respond, Agent Reeves approached. Transport's ready. We need to move now. As they boarded the waiting Blackhawk, Sophie couldn't shake the implications of Tyler's observation. If Monarch's scheme extended beyond exploitation of captives to some larger strategic plan, then rescuing the victims was only the beginning of dismantling their operation. The helicopter lifted off banking southeast toward Quantico. Below, military and law enforcement vehicles continued to converge on Camp Haverson as the nationwide operation gained momentum. Sophie watched the activity diminish with altitude, the individual vehicles merging into patterns of movement like blood cells through arteries. I spent 9 years imagining this day, Tyler said quietly beside her own, finding mom and dad, exposing Monarch, getting justice. But it doesn't feel like I expected. How does it feel? Sophie asked. Unfinished, he replied, gazing out at the landscape sliding beneath them. Like we've opened a door, but can't yet see what's on the other side. Margaret reached across to take both their hands. One door at a time, she said with the quiet authority that had guided them through 9 years of captivity. We've found each other. Now we find the truth. As the Black Hawk carried them toward Quantico in reunion with their parents, Sophie reflected on her grandmother's words. They had indeed found each other against impossible odds. But Tyler was right, something larger lurked behind Monarch's operations, a purpose beyond mere exploitation. The ledger secured in federal custody might provide answers, but Sophie suspected the full truth would require more than documents could reveal. It would demand understanding the minds behind the organization, including her Uncle Victor, whose shadow still stretched across their family's tragedy. We'll need to talk about Victor, she said to Margaret, about why he built those tunnels, what he really intended. Margaret's expression tightened. Victor was complicated. His work began with good intentions, civil defense, national security. But somewhere along the line it changed, or perhaps he changed. You think he knew what Monarch would become? I don't know, Margaret admitted, but I do know he left breadcrumbs of his own. The brass plate on the hidden door, the map Tyler found, he wanted someone to discover the truth eventually. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. There was something else in his old files, something I never fully decoded. A reference to Monarch's final form and a location coordinates in North Dakota. Another facility. Maybe, or maybe where it all began. Tyler looked between his sister and grandmother. Whatever it is, I think we need to find it to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. Sophie felt a familiar determination rising within her, the same drive that had kept her searching for answers about her family's disappearance for 9 long years. Then that's our next step. After we reunite with mom and dad, after we're secure, we find those coordinates. And we finish this, Margaret concluded, her arthritic hand tightening around Sophie's. Not just for our family, but for everyone still trapped in Monarch's web. The Black Hawk continued its journey southeast, carrying the reunited family members toward safety, toward answers, and toward the next phase of their fight against a network that stretched far beyond the tunnels beneath a Michigan farmhouse. I've completed part 3 of Underground Network, focusing on the expanding search and rescue operation as Sophie, Tyler, and Margaret work with federal authorities to locate and free Evelyn and Daniel Walker while beginning to uncover the true scope of Monarch Holdings' activities. Part 4, the network revealed 450 words. The secure medical wing at Quantico buzzed with controlled activity as federal personnel moved purposefully through corridors lined with reinforced doors and biometric scanners. Sophie sat in a waiting area outside the examination rooms where her parents were undergoing comprehensive evaluations. Beside her, Tyler pored over a tablet provided by the FBI analysts, scrolling through data recovered from the Bethlehem facility. Anything useful? Sophie asked, trying to distract herself from the anxiety of waiting. System logs, personnel rotations, transfer manifests, Tyler replied without looking up. I'm cross-referencing against the ledger entries to identify patterns. Margaret returned from speaking with Agent Reeves, settling carefully into a chair across from them. Her arthritis had worsened considerably over the years of captivity, but she refused medication that might cloud her thinking. The doctors say your parents are in remarkably good physical condition, considering, she reported. Malnourished but no acute organ damage. They were kept healthy enough to function. And psychologically, Sophie asked, dreading the answer. Margaret hesitated. That will take more time to assess. Prolonged captivity, isolation, coercion. The impacts aren't always immediately apparent. Before Sophie could press further, Agent Reeves appeared at the doorway. They're ready for visitors now. 20 minutes, then they need rest. They followed her through a security checkpoint to a recovery suite where Evelyn and Daniel Walker sat side by side on a hospital bed dressed in standard issue clothing rather than hospital gowns, a small dignity that Sophie appreciated. Though still visibly gaunt, both appeared more collected than during their video call, the initial shock of rescue beginning to settle. Sophie, Evelyn breathed, opening her arms. The embrace was tentative at first, both mother and daughter careful, as if the other might break, then tightening into 9 years of missed connections. Daniel enclosed both of them in his arms, while Margaret and Tyler completed the circle. For long moments, they simply held each other, a family fractured, and now physically reunited, though the emotional reconnection would take far longer. When they finally separated, Sophie studied her parents more closely. Her mother's hair had been washed and combed, the auburn strands now liberally streaked with gray. Her father's beard had been trimmed, revealing a face thinner, but still recognizable. Both wore identical silver medical bracelets monitoring their vital signs. "They're treating us well," Daniel said, noting Sophie's glance toward the bracelets. "Just precautionary monitoring. Our systems need time to readjust to normal conditions." "Normal," Evelyn echoed with a brittle laugh. "I'm not sure I remember what that is." "It will come back," Margaret assured her, though her own experience suggested otherwise. 9 years in captivity had permanently altered their baseline. Tyler sat on the edge of the bed, tablet still in hand. "I need to ask you both some questions about the facility operations. I know it's soon, but there are still 41 active sites with people who need help." Daniel nodded. "Whatever you need, son." The Bethlehem location, was it primarily research or holding boom? "Both." Evelyn answered, her professional demeanor reasserting itself. They were studying longitudinal effects of isolation on specialized skill sets, how engineers, medical personnel, and others maintain cognitive function under deprivation. "But that wasn't all," Daniel added. "There were conditioning protocols, behavior modification disguised as routine, daily cognitive assessments that seemed to be programming responses to specific triggers." "Triggers?" Sophie asked. "Phrases, images, sound patterns." Daniel explained. "They would show us sequences, then measure how quickly we completed related tasks. Over time, the sequences alone would prompt automatic behaviors." Tyler's expression darkened. "Conditioning for phase 2. You know about phase 2? Evelyn straightened, suddenly alert. "Only references in the system logs," Tyler admitted. "What is it?" Evelyn and Daniel exchanged glances before Daniel spoke. "From what we could gather, Monarch isn't just studying isolation effects or trafficking skilled people. They're creating what they call embedded assets, individuals conditioned to respond to specific activations, then placed back into society." "Sleeper agents," Sophie realized with growing horror. "Not in the traditional espionage sense," Evelyn clarified. "More like human infrastructure. People programmed to perform specific functions when triggered without conscious awareness. Engineers positioned near power grids, medical personnel in key hospitals, technicians at water treatment facilities." "How many have they already released?" Margaret asked. "Dozens, maybe hundreds," Daniel replied. "We only overheard fragments, but they referred to a network activation test scheduled for this fall." Tyler tapped rapidly on his tablet. "The ledger shows 36 individuals marked transferred to external partners and another 52 listed as field deployment completed. If those are the embedded assets, then Monarch has built a human network that could be activated simultaneously," Sophie concluded. "But to what end?" "Infrastructure disruption," Daniel suggested. "Coordinated failures across multiple systems, power, water, communications. Not catastrophic individually, but devastating in combination." Agent Reeves, who had been monitoring the conversation from the doorway, stepped forward. "I need to relay this to Director Marquez immediately. This elevates the threat assessment significantly." As she stepped out to make the call, Sophie turned back to her parents. "Do you know who's behind this? Albert Crowthorne runs operations, but who authorized this phase 2? "We never saw Crowthorne," Evelyn said. "The facility was managed by someone called Brenner, but there were references to a board or council that set overall direction." "And Victor?" Margaret asked quietly. "My brother-in-law. Was he mentioned?" Daniel's expression softened with sympathy. "Margaret, Victor was referenced as the architect, but always in past tense. I don't think he was involved in what Monarch became after his death." "That matches what we found in the tunnels," Tyler added. "His original designs were for civil defense, secure communications, emergency shelters, but someone repurposed them after he died." Margaret nodded, a complex mixture of relief and grief crossing her features. The possibility that Victor hadn't intended this outcome had clearly weighed on her. "The doctors mentioned you were found with 2 others," Sophie prompted, changing the subject. Lisa Chen and Robert Garrett. Yes, Evelyn confirmed. Lisa is a neurologist who specialized in cognitive mapping, how the brain encodes spatial information. Robert is an HVAC engineer with expertise in circulation systems for sensitive environments like clean rooms and biocontainment facilities. Both skills that would be valuable for maintaining and expanding Monarch's underground network, Tyler observed. They helped us stay sane, Daniel added. We formed a support system, shared knowledge, kept each other grounded when the isolation protocols intensified. Where are they now? Sophie asked. Adjacent wing, Evelyn replied. Their families are being notified. Lisa's husband had given up and remarried. Robert's children were told he died in an accident. The human toll of Monarch's operation struck Sophie anew. Beyond her own family's suffering lay dozens, perhaps hundreds of similar stories' lives, interrupted families fractured, years stolen. Agent Reeves returned her expression grave. Director Marquez is escalating this to a national security matter. He's convening a joint task force with Homeland Security, CIA, and NSA to address the embedded assets threat. What about the remaining facilities? Tyler asked. The people still captive. Simultaneous raids are being planned for the 17 confirmed locations. The challenge is identifying and securing the other sites before Monarch realizes we're on to Phase 2 and activates their network prematurely. Or destroys evidence, Margaret added, like they attempted at their headquarters. Agent Reeves nodded grimly. Exactly. Which brings me to the next development. We've located Albert Crowthorne. Facial recognition picked him up at a private airfield near Rochester, Minnesota. He boarded a chartered flight 30 minutes ago heading west. Tyler immediately began working on his tablet. Rochester, check if there's a Monarch facility in that region, probably coded as MN something in the ledger. Already on it, Reeves confirmed. Analysts found an entry for MNR3 coordinates matching an abandoned missile silo outside Minette, North Dakota. North Dakota, Tyler repeated, looking up sharply. That's where the coordinates from Victor's files pointed the reference to Monarch's final form. You think Crowthorne is heading to some kind of central facility? Sophie asked. Or a command center, Daniel suggested. Somewhere he could initiate a network-wide purge or premature activation. Reeves's phone buzzed with an incoming message. Director Marquez wants all of you in the secure briefing room immediately. We're formulating an interception plan. As they prepared to leave, Evelyn caught Sophie's hand. We just found each other again. Please be careful. We will, Sophie promised, but we need to end this for everyone still trapped in the system. The briefing room was a hive of focused activity when they arrived. Digital displays showed maps tracking Crowthorne's flight in real time alongside satellite imagery of what appeared to be a converted missile silo complex in the North Dakota plains. FBI analysts worked alongside intelligence personnel from multiple agencies, consolidating data from the ledger with information gleaned from the Bethlehem raid. Director Marquez stood at the center, coordinating the multi-agency response. He acknowledged their arrival with a nod. The Walker family good. We need your unique insights on this operation. What's the situation? Sophie asked. Crowthorne's flight is 90 minutes from landing at a private strip near Minette, Marquez explained, indicating the tracking display. Satellite imaging confirms activity at the silo site, vehicles arriving, personnel movement. They appear to be preparing for something significant. Evacuation, Margaret suggested. Or activation, possibly both, Marquez replied. Based on your parents' information about Phase 2, we believe this site may serve as the command and control center for the entire Monarch network. If Crowthorne reaches it, he could potentially activate their embedded assets nationwide, or destroy evidence before we can identify them all, Tyler added. Precisely. Marquez gestured to another screen where tactical plans were being formulated. We're mobilizing a joint FBI, HRT, and Special Forces team to intercept. Air support from Minot Air Force Base ground teams converging from multiple directions. You need to be careful, Daniel warned. These facilities are designed with extensive countermeasures both against external breach and internal compromise. I've already briefed the tactical teams on what we learned from Bethlehem, Reeves assured him, but we could use additional insights. Tyler stepped forward, examining the satellite imagery. This isn't just another holding facility. The surface structures, the power consumption patterns, this is significantly larger than anything we've seen so far. It's a repurposed Minuteman missile silo. an intelligence analyst explained. Decommissioned in the 1990s, officially filled with concrete and sealed. Property records show it was purchased by a shell company traced back to Monarch Holdings in 2015. But they didn't fill it, Sophie realized. They expanded it. Thermal imaging suggests at least 8 underground levels, the analyst confirmed. Power consumption equivalent to a small town mostly drawn from an independent reactor system. This could be where they're coordinating all the transfers, Margaret suggested. The hub of their operation? Or something worse, Tyler said quietly, still studying the imagery. Look at these cooling systems, the satellite uplink arrays. This isn't just administration, it's active research and development. Director Marquez turned to the Walker family. Given your unique knowledge of Monarch's operations, I'm offering you a choice. You can remain here under paid protection, which is the standard protocol for recovered victims, or you can assist the operation in a consultative capacity from our mobile command center. Your insights could save lives, but I won't put you at further risk without consent. Sophie looked to her family. Tyler's expression was resolute. He had spent 9 years fighting this system from the inside and clearly wanted to see it through to the end. Her parents appeared more hesitant, the prospect of facing another Monarch facility clearly triggering fresh trauma. Margaret's face remained carefully neutral, waiting for the others to decide. I want to help, Tyler said firmly. I know their systems, their protocols. I can guide the tactical teams through the digital countermeasures. I'll go too, Sophie declared. I'm a security consultant now that expertise could be useful. Evelyn and Daniel exchanged glances before Daniel spoke. We've just been rescued. We're not in any condition to return to the field, but we can provide remote consultation from here. I'll stay with them, Margaret decided. My arthritis would only slow the operation, and someone should remain with Evelyn and Daniel. Marquez nodded. Then it's settled. Sophie and Tyler will accompany the advance team to the mobile command center near Minette. Your parents and grandmother will work with our analyst here to process intelligence in real time. When do we leave? Sophie asked. Immediately, Reeves replied. Transport is waiting on the tarmac. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Sophie and Tyler were equipped with secure communications gear and briefed on operational protocols. Their parents provided detailed information about Monarch's containment systems and conditioning methods, which were relayed to the tactical teams converging on North Dakota. By late afternoon, Sophie found herself aboard a military transport aircraft flying west toward a confrontation she could never have imagined when she'd arrived at her grandmother's house just days earlier. Beside her, Tyler reviewed schematics of missile silo construction, identifying potential entry points and security vulnerabilities. You've changed, Sophie observed during a quiet moment. The boy I knew was fascinated by history and maps, but this tactical thinking, 9 years in their system changes you, Tyler replied without looking up. I had to become what they didn't expect, someone who could navigate their world while undermining it from within. Were there others, people who helped you? Tyler's expression softened slightly. A few. Some of the guards were just doing jobs, not true believers. One of them, Michael, smuggled components to us, looked the other way when I accessed systems. He disappeared last year. I think they figured out he was helping us. And the other captives, most were transferred regularly. Monarch kept us isolated, limited contact to prevent organization. But information still traveled through maintenance requests, laundry notes, supply adjustments. We built a communication network right under their noses. Sophie marveled at her brother's resilience. The 11-year-old boy had grown into a young man of extraordinary capability and determination, forged by circumstances no one should endure, yet not broken by them. Tyler, she began hesitantly, when this is over, what then? How do we go back to normal life? He finally looked up, his expression thoughtful. I don't think we do, not the way you mean. Normal ended 9 years ago, but we build something new, something better. Use what we've learned to make sure this never happens to anyone else. The aircraft began its descent toward a military installation near Minot, North Dakota. Through the window, Sophie could see the vast expanse of plains stretching to the horizon, scattered farmhouses, and roads cutting through the landscape like geometric patterns. Somewhere ahead lay the missile silo complex that might hold the key to dismantling Monarch's entire operation. Upon landing, they were immediately transported to a mobile command center established 10 miles from the target site. The facility resembled a high-tech field hospital with interconnected tents housing communications equipment, tactical planning stations, and medical support. Director Marquez had arrived ahead of them and was already coordinating with the operation leaders. Crowthorne landed 30 minutes ago, he informed them as they entered the command tent. Satellite tracking confirms he proceeded directly to the silo complex. Thermal imaging shows increased activity across all subsurface levels. They're preparing for something, Sophie observed, studying the live feeds displayed on the monitors. Most likely a purge, Tyler suggested, destroying evidence before we can access it. Or they could be initiating Phase 2 prematurely. Agent Reeves approached with a tactical officer introduced as Commander Kovac, the same HRT leader who had overseen the Bethlehem rescue. We've established a perimeter and mapped all surface access points, Kovac reported. Drone reconnaissance shows minimal external security. They're relying on the remote location and subsurface defenses. Don't underestimate those defenses, Tyler warned. Monarch facilities are designed with progressive containment protocols. Each level will have independent security systems, many with biological or chemical countermeasures. Understood. Kovac nodded. That's why we need your guidance. Can you identify the most vulnerable entry point? Tyler studied the thermal imaging display, which showed heat signatures representing the silo's internal structure. The main personnel entrance will be heavily monitored, but there should be emergency ventilation shafts here and here. He indicated 2 points on the perimeter. Probably disguised as agricultural infrastructure, windmill pumps, or grain storage. Confirmed, an analyst called from a nearby station. We've identified structures matching that description at both locations. Start with the northern shaft, Tyler advised. It should connect to the environmental control systems, bypassing the main security checkpoints. But be prepared for air quality monitoring. They'll have sensors for unexpected oxygen consumption. Kovac relayed the instructions to his team, who began preparations for the approach. Sophie watched the controlled chaos of the operation with a mixture of awe and anxiety. The scale of the response, military helicopters, FBI tactical units, intelligence personnel drove home the significance of what they had uncovered. We've got movement on the surface, a surveillance operator announced. Multiple vehicles departing the main entrance, high speed heading east. Evacuation, Marquez questioned. Possible, Kovac replied, or a diversion. Track those vehicles, Marquez ordered, but maintain focus on the primary objective. A communications officer approached with an update. Sir, we've established a secure link with Quantico. The Walker parents have provided additional intelligence based on documents recovered from Bethlehem. On a separate monitor, Evelyn and Daniel appeared via video link, now dressed in more substantial clothing and looking marginally stronger than during their earlier reunion. Sophie, Tyler, Evelyn began without preamble. We've been analyzing the conditioning protocols from the Bethlehem files. There's a pattern to the trigger sequences. They're all based on mathematical constants. Specifically, they use variations of the Fibonacci sequence, Daniel added. We think it's a fail-safe mechanism ensuring that random environmental stimuli don't accidentally trigger programmed responses. That could help us identify and deprogram the embedded assets, Marquez noted. There's more, Evelyn continued. The files reference a Genesis protocol, a master activation sequence that would trigger all assets simultaneously. It requires biometric authentication from at least 3 board members. Crowthorne would be one, Sophie reasoned. Who are the others? That's the problem, Daniel replied. The names are coded, but one set of biometrics is labeled Architect Legacy. Tyler looked up sharply. Victor's biometrics, but he's been dead for years. Not his actual biometrics, Daniel clarified. Something derived from them, maybe genetic material preserved after his death. The files suggest Monarch maintains a biological repository at the North Dakota facility. The implications sent a chill through Sophie. They kept samples from Victor to maintain access to the systems he designed even after his death. Which means the silo facility isn't just administrative, Tyler concluded. It's where they store the keys to the entire network. Agent Reeves, who had been monitoring the exchange, turned to Marquez. Sir, this changes the operational parameters. We're not just preventing a purge or gathering evidence, we're potentially disrupting an imminent network activation. Marquez nodded grimly. Elevate to code red. I want all teams in position within 30 minutes. As preparations accelerated around them, Sophie pulled Tyler aside. If they need Victor's biometrics for the Genesis protocol, could that be why they took us? We're his relatives genetically connected. Tyler's expression darkened with realization. That's why they kept Grandma all these years, not just for her administrative skills, but for her genetic relationship to Victor, and why they didn't eliminate us even when I started hacking their systems. We weren't just captives, Sophie whispered. We were keys. Before Tyler could respond, an alarm sounded from the surveillance station. Thermal surge detected below ground, massive power fluctuation across all levels. They're initiating something, Tyler warned, rushing to the monitor. This pattern, it's similar to the system tests I observed in the Michigan facility, but on a much larger scale. Could this be the Genesis protocol? Marquez demanded. Possibly, Tyler replied, but they'd need all the biometric keys, including the architect legacy sample. Which they have, Sophie reminded him. And if they've been keeping tissue samples from Victor, they might have collected genetic material from Grandma during her captivity. Now, Commander Kovac approached, tactical gear already in place. We're ready to move on your order, sir. Marquez looked to Sophie and Tyler. Final recommendations. Tyler didn't hesitate. Target the environmental control systems first. If they're initiating Genesis, they'll have powered up all auxiliary systems, which means temporarily reduced security on maintenance access points. And once inside, Sophie added, prioritize the biological repository. If we can secure or destroy Victor's samples, they can't complete the authentication sequence. Understood. Kovac nodded. Walker, we could use your expertise on site for system navigation. Tyler looked to Sophie, who understood the unspoken question. After 9 years in captivity, he was volunteering to return to the belly of the beast that had imprisoned him. I'll go, Tyler decided. I know their systems better than anyone. Not alone, Sophie insisted. I'm coming too. Negative, Kovac countered. Civilian consultants remain at the command center. My brother spent 9 years fighting this system from the inside, Sophie argued. I spent 9 years developing security expertise to find him. You need both of us. Marquez considered this, then nodded. They go as far as the forward command post, no further. Full protective gear and constant communication. Minutes later, Sophie found herself aboard a tactical helicopter, wearing body armor and communications equipment as they approached the silo complex. Beside her, Tyler appeared remarkably calm, reviewing last-minute intelligence on a secure tablet. Are you sure about this? She asked over the headset. No, he admitted, but it's necessary. Everything we've endured, everything Mom, Dad, and Grandma suffered, it leads to this moment. We don't just rescue victims, we dismantle the entire system. Through the helicopter's window, Sophie could see the target site coming into view, a cluster of nondescript agricultural buildings surrounding what appeared to be grain silos and storage sheds. Only the thermal imaging overlay revealed the true nature of the facility, a massive underground complex, humming with activity, its heat signature bleeding through the prairie soil like a mechanical infection. 1 minute to drop zone, the pilot announced. All teams, final positions. Sophie looked at her brother, no longer the child who had disappeared playing hide and seek, but a young man prepared to confront the organization that had stolen 9 years of his life. In his expression, she saw not just determination, but something more profound, the certainty that their family's tragedy had purpose, revealing and dismantling a threat few could have imagined. Ready? She asked. Tyler nodded, eyes fixed on the approaching complex. Hide and seek ends tonight. As the helicopter descended toward the forward command post, Sophie felt a strange symmetry closing. 9 years ago, a game of hide and seek had revealed a hidden door in a Michigan basement. Now that same door had led them across the country to confront the architects of a clandestine network embedded within American infrastructure. The true scope of Monarch's operation was still unfolding, but one thing was certain: the Walker family had transformed from victims into the keys to its undoing. Whatever lay beneath the North Dakota prairie, whatever final form Victor Reed's legacy had taken, they would face it together. The helicopter touched down, rotors whipping prairie grass into frenzied patterns. Ahead, tactical teams moved into position around the silo perimeter, their disciplined formation a stark contrast to the seemingly peaceful agricultural setting. Command to all units. Marquez's voice came through the comm system. Operation Lantern is a go. Repeat, Operation Lantern is a go. Sophie and Tyler stepped onto North Dakota soil, the wind carrying the scent of earth and distant rain. Before them, the unassuming buildings concealed an underground labyrinth where Albert Crowthorne was possibly initiating a protocol designed to activate sleeper agents throughout the nation's critical infrastructure. "This ends today," Sophie said as much to herself as to Tyler. Her brother nodded, his eyes fixed on the facility that represented everything they had fought against. "Not just for us, for everyone they have taken." Together, they moved toward the forward command post, while around them the machinery of justice finally closed in on Monarch's hidden empire. I've completed part 4 of Underground Network, focusing on the reunion with Sophie's parents and the discovery of Monarch Holdings' true purpose with their Phase 2 plan involving sleeper agents embedded throughout critical infrastructure. The story now moves to North Dakota for the final confrontation at Monarch's command center. Part 5, Dismantling and Rebirth. 200 words. The forward command post buzzed with controlled urgency as tactical teams communicated their positions around the missile silo complex. Sophie and Tyler occupied a small monitoring station at the edge of the operations tent following the infiltration on secure tablets linked to the operator's body cameras. Commander Kovac's team had successfully located the northern ventilation shaft disguised as an agricultural pump and were preparing to breach. Approaching primary access point, Kovac's voice came through the comm system. "No external security measures detected." "They'll have internal sensors," Tyler warned. "Pressure plates, motion detection, atmospheric monitoring." "Copy that. Deploying countermeasures." On screen, Sophie watched as specialized equipment was attached to the ventilation housing devices designed to mask the team's entry by maintaining consistent airflow patterns and temperature. The outer casing was carefully removed, revealing a vertical shaft wide enough for personnel access. "Thermal imaging confirms connection to sublevel 2, an analyst reported. "Heat signatures indicate minimal personnel in that section." "They're concentrated deeper," Tyler observed, studying the broader sensor data. "Levels 5 through 8 show intense activity. That's where Crowthorne will be." Director Marquez joined them, his expression grim. "Latest satellite pass detected a significant power surge in the facility's eastern quadrant. Whatever they're initiating is accelerating." "The Genesis protocol," Sophie suggested. "If they believe their network is compromised, they might be attempting a premature activation." "Or a controlled destruction of evidence," Tyler added. "Either way, we need to reach the biological repository before they can complete the authentication sequence." On the tactical feed, Kovac's team began their descent into the ventilation shaft, moving with practiced efficiency. Fiber optic cameras deployed ahead of them revealed a complex network of ducts and maintenance passages far more extensive than typical missile silo architecture. "This isn't military standard," one of the operators noted. "These modifications are extensive and recent." "Monarch has been developing this facility for years," Tyler explained, "expanding the original structure, adding levels, integrating systems from their other sites." The team reached a junction where the shaft widened into a maintenance corridor. Infrared sensors swept the area ahead, detecting no immediate human presence, but identifying numerous electronic security measures. "Security node at the corridor intersection," Kovac reported. "Appears to be motion and heat-based." Tyler leaned forward, studying the camera feed. "That's a Series 8 system similar to what they used in Michigan. There should be a bypass protocol accessible through the maintenance panel to your left." The team located the panel and deployed specialized equipment to interface with the security system. Moments later, the sensors deactivated, allowing them to proceed undetected. "We're in," Kovac confirmed, proceeding to sublevel 2. Sophie felt a strange mixture of pride and concern watching her brother guide the tactical team through Monarch's security measures. The knowledge he had gained during 9 years of captivity was now being used to dismantle the very system that had imprisoned him. But each interaction with that system seemed to pull him deeper into its architecture, reconnecting him to the trauma he'd endured. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. Tyler nodded without taking his eyes off the screen. "It's like revisiting a nightmare, but this time I control the narrative." A communications officer approached with an update. "Secure line from Quantico. Your grandmother has additional information about the facility layout." On a separate monitor, Margaret appeared looking more focused than she had earlier. Behind her, Evelyn and Daniel could be seen consulting with FBI analysts. "Tyler, Sophie," Margaret began without preamble. "We've been reviewing the Bethlehem files and found references to the North Dakota facility's original purpose. It wasn't just a command center, it was designed as Victor's legacy project, something called continuity of innovation." "What does that mean?" Sophie asked. Victor believed that certain research was too valuable to be lost due to political shifts or funding changes, Margaret explained. The silo was originally designed to preserve scientific work he considered essential, regardless of official support. After his death, Monarch perverted that purpose. That explains the biological repository, Tyler reasoned. It wasn't just storing samples for authentication, it was preserving genetic material from researchers themselves. Precisely, Margaret confirmed, and the repository should be located on level 6 near what they call the architect's chamber. Director Marquez, who had been listening to the exchange, immediately relayed this information to Kovac's team. Adjust primary objective to level 6 biological repository. Secure or neutralize the architect legacy samples. Copy that, Kovac responded. We've reached sublevel 2, proceeding to central access shaft. On the tactical feeds, Sophie could see the team moving through eerily sterile corridors, white walls, recessed lighting, and occasional workstations abandoned in apparent haste. Unlike the Bethlehem facility with its industrial character, this complex resembled a high-tech research installation. No personnel encountered yet, Kovac reported. Either they've withdrawn to lower levels or evacuated. Be careful, Tyler warned. This feels wrong. Monarch protocols would have security teams patrolling all levels during a high-alert situation. As if confirming his concern, alarms suddenly blared through the facility. Red emergency lights activated and steel containment doors began sealing corridors throughout the complex. We've been detected, Kovac shouted over the noise. Containment protocols initiating. It's not you, Tyler realized, studying the pattern of door activations on the security system. They're implementing facility-wide lockdown. This is the Genesis protocol preparation sequence. All non-essential personnel are being sealed in secure zones while critical systems power up. Can you override it? Marquez demanded. Tyler's fingers flew across his tablet. Not remotely. But it actually works in our favor. The emergency protocols will open maintenance access routes to ensure critical systems remain operational. He guided the team to a service ladder concealed behind an environmental control panel. This should provide direct access to sublevel 4, bypassing the sealed zones. As Kovac's team navigated the newly available route, a second tactical unit reported successfully breaching the southern access point. They were encountering similar automated lockdown procedures, but no human resistance. Update from aerial surveillance, an intelligence officer announced. No further vehicle departures from the facility. Whatever they're doing, Crowthorne and his team are committed to seeing it through on-site. Or they have another exit we haven't identified, Sophie suggested. The thought had barely left her lips when a seismic monitoring station began registering unusual activity beneath the complex. Vibrations detected below known facility depth, an analyst reported, consistent with large mechanical systems activating. Tyler studied the readings with growing concern. Those aren't recorded on any of the silo schematics. They must have excavated deeper than the original military construction. Another level, Sophie questioned. Or an escape tunnel, Tyler suggested. A last resort exit strategy. Director Marquez immediately ordered satellite surveillance to expand their search radius, looking for potential exit points beyond the known perimeter. Meanwhile, Kovac's team had reached sublevel 4 and was proceeding toward the central elevator shaft that would take them deeper. Encountering first resistance, Kovac reported as gunfire erupted on the tactical feed. Security personnel at the elevator checkpoint. Engaging. Sophie watched tensely as the team exchanged fire with Monarch guards, eventually securing the position with non-lethal methods where possible. The guards wore unmarked tactical gear, with a small stylized butterfly emblem, Monarch's field operatives rather than standard security contractors. These aren't just hired guns, Tyler observed. They're part of Monarch's core protection detail. Crowthorne must be implementing something critical to deploy them. The team secured access to the central shaft and began their descent toward level 6. As they passed level 5, the camera feeds revealed glimpses of what appeared to be extensive laboratory facilities, rows of sophisticated equipment, medical stations, and what looked disturbingly like containment pods, similar to those found in the Bethlehem facility. What were they doing down there? Sophie whispered. Developing the next generation of conditioning protocols, Tyler suggested grimly. More efficient methods of programming their embedded assets. Kovac's team reached level 6 and moved cautiously into a circular corridor surrounding what appeared to be the facility's core. Signage indicated they had reached the preservation sector. This matches the Bethlehem file's description of the biological repository, Margaret confirmed over the comlink. The architect's chamber should be at the center of this level. As they approached the central chamber, resistance intensified. More Monarch operatives emerged from side corridors, forcing the tactical team to advance methodically, securing each section before proceeding. Through the camera feeds, Sophie could see they were approaching a set of reinforced doors marked with the same butterfly emblem and the words Legacy Archive. "This is it," Tyler confirmed, "the biological repository." Kovac's team prepared breaching charges while the 2nd Tactical Unit reported reaching Level 5, moving to provide backup. The operation was proceeding according to plan, yet Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Monarch's security response seemed too predictable, too easily countered. "Tyler," she said quietly, "do you remember what you told me about the hide-and-seek game 9 years ago? How they always let you think you were winning before changing the rules?" Tyler looked up from his tablet, understanding dawning in his eyes. "This is too easy. They're letting us reach the repository." He turned to Director Marquez. "Sir, I think this is a diversion. The real action is happening elsewhere in the facility." Marquez considered this, then nodded to a communications officer. "Get me a complete thermal map of all sublevels real-time. Look for anomalous heat signatures, especially below the known structure." While they waited for the updated scan, Kovac's team breached the repository doors. The camera feeds revealed a vast circular chamber lined with cryogenic storage units, each containing thousands of biological samples preserved in vacuum-sealed containers. At the center stood a raised platform with specialized equipment surrounding what appeared to be a single isolation pod. "The architect's chamber," Margaret confirmed over the comlink. "That's where Victor's legacy samples would be stored." Kovac approached the central pod, reporting as he moved. "Central unit appears active. Internal temperature -20 Celsius. Digital readout indicates authentication sequence initiated." "They've already started the Genesis protocol," Tyler realized. "We need to interrupt that sequence immediately." "How?" Goofy asked. "Destroy the samples," Tyler replied without hesitation. "Without Victor's biometric authentication, they can't complete the sequence." Marquez relayed the instruction to Kovac, who prepared to place charges on the central unit. But as he approached, a security mechanism activated clear barriers rising from the floor to encase the platform in what appeared to be bulletproof glass. "Containment protocol engaged," an automated voice announced throughout the chamber. "Legacy materials secured. Unauthorized access detected." Simultaneously, the promised thermal scan appeared on the command center displays, revealing what they had feared: a massive heat signature 2 levels below the known facility depth. The pattern suggested a large space with significant power consumption and numerous human presences. "That's where Crowthorne is," Sophie pointed to the anomalous reading. "The repository is just a decoy." "Not a decoy," Tyler corrected, studying the data. "A backup. They're running parallel authentication processes, one here with the stored samples and another in that hidden level." "With what?" Sophie asked, then gasped as realization struck. "With Grandma's samples. They must have collected her genetic material during captivity. She's Victor's sister-in-law, close enough for partial authentication." Tyler was already contacting Quantico. "Grandma, did they ever take blood samples or tissue from you during your captivity?" Margaret's expression confirmed their fears before she spoke. "Regularly. They claimed it was for health monitoring, but they took far more than necessary. And they were particularly interested in epithelial cells, skin hair, mucosal tissues." "They were building a genetic profile," Evelyn interjected, "possibly attempting to reconstruct Victor's genetic markers through family similarities." Director Marquez immediately revised the operation parameters. Kovac maintained position at the repository. Second team proceed to locate access to the uncharted level. Priority is interrupting whatever authentication process Crowthorne is conducting. "Sir," a communications officer called urgently. "We're detecting data transmissions from the facility, high bandwidth, encrypted broadcasting to multiple receivers nationwide." "It's starting," Tyler warned. "They're transmitting activation codes to their embedded assets." "Can we jam it?" Marquez demanded. "Not effectively," the communications specialist replied. "They're using multiple frequencies and transmission methods. We might block some, but not all." Sophie turned to Tyler. "There must be a kill switch, some way to abort the process. Victor would have built-in fail-safes. Tyler nodded slowly, his expression clearing as he accessed memories from years of studying Monarch systems. The architect's code. Victor always incorporated an override command in his systems, a mathematical sequence based on his wife's birthday. April 18, 1943. Margaret confirmed over the comlink. He used variations of 4.18.43 in all his security protocols. If we can access the main transmission system, Tyler continued, we might be able to insert the abort code into the outgoing signal stream. It wouldn't just jam the transmission, it would send a cancellation command to any assets already activated. Marquez didn't hesitate. Where would the transmission equipment be located? Level 8, Tyler replied. The communications hub. It would be the lowest level of the original silo structure before their unauthorized excavation. The 2nd Tactical Team was redirected to locate and secure the communications hub, while Kovac's team continued attempting to breach the repository's protective barriers. Sophie and Tyler watched the operation unfold on multiple feeds, aware that each passing minute allowed more activation signals to reach Monarch's embedded assets across the country. Look, Sophie pointed to a security feed the tactical team had accessed. It showed Albert Crowthorne in what appeared to be a control center deep beneath the original silo structure. He was surrounded by technical personnel and security teams focused on a central console displaying a nationwide map with countless blinking points of light. That's their network, Tyler confirmed. Each light represents an embedded asset receiving the activation signal. And they're acknowledging receipt, Sophie noted, seeing the lights changing from red to green across the map. The conditioning is working. The 2nd Tactical Team reported reaching level 8 and encountering heavy resistance around the communications hub. Meanwhile, Kovac had managed to breach the outer barrier of the architect's chamber, but was still working on the inner containment system. We're running out of time, Marquez observed grimly. At this rate, a significant percentage of their network will be activated before we can interrupt the transmission. Sophie studied the security feed showing Crowthorne's command center, noticing something about the configuration of the equipment. Tyler, look at the transmission array. Doesn't that architecture seem familiar? Tyler focused on the details she indicated, then nodded with sudden recognition. It's based on Grandpa's ham radio setup, the same array configuration he used in the basement. Victor must have incorporated elements of his brother's designs, which means it might have the same vulnerabilities, Sophie realized. Grandpa's system had a frequency harmonics issue. If you broadcast on certain overlapping wavelengths, it created signal degradation. Tyler was already calculating the necessary frequencies. If we can access any broadcasting equipment, we might be able to generate the harmonic interference pattern externally. Director Marquez immediately ordered available aircraft to prepare for electronic countermeasures. Meanwhile, the tactical teams continued their advance, now coordinating a two-pronged approach. One team still working to breach the repository, the other fighting through heavy resistance toward the communications hub. New development, a surveillance operator announced. Seismic sensors detecting movement beneath the facility, some kind of transport system activating. They're preparing to evacuate Crowthorne, Sophie guessed. There must be an escape tunnel leading away from the facility. Satellite thermal imaging confirms, an analyst reported. Underground passage extending approximately 2 miles southwest, emerging in what appears to be an abandoned farm structure. Marquez immediately dispatched units to secure the exit point, while the operation inside the facility continued. On the tactical feeds, the 2nd Team had finally reached the outer doors of the communications hub and was preparing to breach. Wait, Tyler called out, studying the security systems. That entire section is rigged with countermeasures. Standard breach protocols will trigger them. He guided the team through an alternative approach using the facility's own maintenance systems to create a safe entry point. Within minutes, they had accessed the communications hub, a vast room filled with server racks, transmission equipment, and workstations now abandoned by Monarch personnel. We need to locate the primary signal processor, Tyler instructed. It should be a standalone unit with direct connections to the transmission array. The team identified the equipment, a sophisticated system isolated from the main server cluster, still actively broadcasting the activation signals. One of the operators, a technical specialist, began working to interrupt the transmission while simultaneously preparing to inject the abort code Tyler had provided. Sir, the surveillance operator called out, movement at the southwest exit point. Vehicle approaching the concealed entrance. Crowthorne's escape transport, Marquez confirmed. All units at that location prepare to intercept. On multiple screens, Sophie watched as the operation reached its climax. The tactical team in the communications hub, working to interrupt the activation broadcast units positioned to capture Crowthorne and Kovac's team, still attempting to breach the final barrier protecting Victor's legacy samples. Something's happening, the technical specialist reported from the communications hub. The transmission pattern is changing. On screen, the map in Crowthorne's command center showed the activated points beginning to flash yellow instead of green. Technical staff around him appeared agitated, working frantically at their stations. They've detected our intrusion, Tyler realized. They're trying to lock us out of the system. Or accelerate the activation sequence, Sophie suggested, pushing through as many signals as possible before we can stop them. The specialist in the communications hub continued working, finally announcing, "I've isolated the primary transmission channel, preparing to insert the abort code." As he did so, Kovac reported success in breaching the final barrier at the repository. Central pod accessed. Contents appear to be biological samples in cryogenic storage. "Destroy them," Marquez ordered. "Ensure they can't be used for authentication." Simultaneously, units at the southwest exit reported visual contact with a transport vehicle emerging from the concealed tunnel. Target vehicle identified, moving to intercept. Sophie felt as though she were watching a complex chess match reach its endgame, multiple pieces moving across various boards, each critical to the ultimate outcome. The technical specialist successfully inserted the abort code into the transmission stream, and on the security feed the effect was immediate. The points on Crowthorne's map began changing from yellow to black, indicating signal termination. At the same moment, Kovac's team neutralized the biological samples in the central pod, ensuring they could never be used to authenticate the Genesis protocol. And at the southwest exit, tactical units surrounded the emerging transport vehicle, preventing Crowthorne's escape. Primary transmission interrupted, the specialist confirmed. Abort code successfully propagated through the network. "All embedded assets should be receiving the cancellation signal," Tyler explained. "The conditioning included mandatory response to the architect's code. They can't ignore it even if already activated." On the command center displays, data began flowing in from across the country, reports of averted incidents at power stations, water treatment facilities, transportation centers, and communications hubs. The embedded assets momentarily activated had been successfully shut down before they could execute their programmed tasks. Southwest team reports Crowthorne in custody, a communications officer announced. No casualties. A collective exhale seemed to pass through the command center. After years of operation in the shadows, Monarch's network had been exposed and neutralized in a matter of hours. The organization that had stolen 9 years from the Walker family had finally been dismantled. "All teams secure your positions and begin evidence collection," Marquez ordered. "Priority on documentation of the Genesis protocol and identification of all embedded assets." Sophie turned to Tyler, seeing in his eyes the same complex mixture of emotions. She felt relief, vindication, and a strange emptiness now that the driving purpose of their lives had been fulfilled. "It's over," she said quietly. Tyler shook his head slightly. "Not yet. We've stopped the immediate threat, but the embedded assets are still out there. People who don't even know they were conditioned. And there's no guarantee we've identified all of Monarch's facilities. But we've got the ledger, their central database, and Crowthorne in custody," Sophie countered. "We can dismantle what remains. And help the victims," Tyler added with sudden determination. "Not just our family, but everyone affected by this. That's the next phase." Director Marquez approached his expression, reflecting both satisfaction and sobering awareness of the work ahead. "Preliminary reports indicate we've successfully interrupted the activation sequence. Intelligence teams are already processing data to identify and locate all embedded assets for deprogramming." "What about the people still held in the other facilities?" Sophie asked. "Simultaneous operations are underway at all 17 confirmed locations," Marquez assured her. "Initial reports indicate successful breaches at 12 sites so far, with captives being recovered alive." "And Crowthorne," Tyler inquired, "in custody and talking. Seems he's eager to negotiate leniency by providing information on Monarch's board members and financial backers." Marquez's expression hardened. "He'll get no sympathy from me, but his cooperation will help us dismantle what remains of the organization." Sophie felt a buzzing from her pocket, the secure phone connecting to Quantico. Margaret, Evelyn, and Daniel appeared on screen, their faces reflecting cautious celebration as they received updates on the operation's success. "You did it?" Evelyn said, voice thick with emotion. "Both of you." "We all did," Sophie corrected. "Everything you learned and shared made this possible." "What happens now?" Daniel asked. "You're all being transferred to a secure recovery facility," Marquez answered, joining the call. "The best medical and psychological support we can provide for as long as necessary. Your testimony will be crucial to prosecutions, but your well-being comes first." And after that, Margaret asked the question they were all considering. After the debriefings and testimony and recovery, what then? There was a moment of silence as the family contemplated a future they had barely allowed themselves to imagine during 9 years of separation. "We rebuild," Sophie finally said. "Together." Tyler nodded, adding, "And we make sure this never happens to anyone else." 3 months later, Sophie stood at the edge of a construction site on the grounds of what had once been her grandmother's Michigan farmhouse. The original structure had been carefully dismantled, its materials preserved for historical documentation. In its place, a new facility was taking shape, the National Center for Recovery and Reintegration, dedicated to supporting victims of trafficking and psychological manipulation. Tyler emerged from a planning trailer, architectural drawings in hand. At 21, he had already been recruited by multiple intelligence agencies for his expertise in countering sophisticated security systems. Instead, he had chosen to focus his talents on developing technology to identify and rescue victims of operations similar to Monarch. "The Secure Communications Center is almost complete," he reported. "We should be operational by spring." Sophie nodded, surveying the progress. Her own security consulting firm had pivoted entirely to supporting the center's work developing detection systems for hidden structures and covert facilities. A car approached along the driveway, and Sophie recognized her parents and grandmother arriving for their weekly site visit. Evelyn and Daniel had made remarkable progress in their recovery, though both still attended intensive therapy sessions. They had chosen to remain involved in the center's development, with Evelyn advising on medical protocols and Daniel consulting on the facility's design. Margaret, now using a motorized wheelchair due to her worsening arthritis, had become an unexpected public figure. Her testimony before congressional committees had been instrumental in securing funding for nationwide initiatives to combat sophisticated trafficking networks. "The East Wing framing is complete," Daniel called as he approached professional assessment, temporarily overshadowing the trauma that still occasionally clouded his eyes. "They're starting electrical next week." In the secure dormitory, Evelyn asked, her focus always on the future residents' comfort and safety. "Ahead of schedule," Tyler assured her. "The contractors understand the importance." As the family walked the perimeter of the construction site, Sophie reflected on the transformation of their tragedy into purpose. The Monarch investigation had ultimately identified over 200 individuals held in facilities across the country and nearly 150 embedded assets who had been conditioned without their knowledge. The process of recovering and deprogramming these victims had become the family's shared mission. They paused at the site of the original basement, now excavated and reinforced to create a demonstration facility where law enforcement and rescue personnel could train to identify and navigate hidden structures. The space that had once concealed their nightmare had been reclaimed as a tool for prevention. "Senator Davis called this morning," Margaret informed them. "The Integrity and Infrastructure Act passed committee. Full floor vote next week." The legislation, developed in direct response to the Monarch case, would require advanced scanning of all federally funded construction projects to detect unauthorized modifications or hidden spaces. It was just one of many reforms emerging from the congressional investigations. "The FBI identified 3 more Monarch board members," Sophie added. "International warrants have been issued." The dismantling of Monarch's financial and political network had revealed connections to prominent figures in business, government, and even law enforcement. Each revelation had sent shockwaves through institutions that had unwittingly harbored supporters of the organization. As the sun began to set over the construction site, the family gathered at a temporary memorial erected where the farmhouse porch had once stood, a simple stone marker, acknowledging both what had been lost and what had been found. 9 years in darkness, Tyler mused, and now all this light. Evelyn slipped her arm around her son's shoulders, the gesture still carrying traces of hesitation from their time apart. Light finds hidden places, she said. That's what you taught us. Daniel checked his watch. We should head back. The coordinator from the Department of Justice is meeting us at 7 to discuss the next phase of victim reintegration. As they walked toward their vehicles, Sophie noticed Tyler lingering at the memorial stone, his expression contemplative. What are you thinking? She asked, joining him. About the game, he replied. Hide and seek. It started with that 9 years ago. He looked up at the framework of the new building rising against the evening sky. Now we're the seekers. Sophie nodded, understanding the symmetry. What had begun as a children's game interrupted by tragedy had transformed into a mission, finding those still hidden, bringing them into the light, ensuring no one remained trapped in shadows. Ready, she asked, echoing the call that had started their ordeal years before. Tyler smiled, taking a final look at the construction site before turning toward the future they were building. Ready? Together they walked away from where the hidden door had once concealed secrets beneath ordinary life, toward a world where such doors could no longer remain unopened, such secrets no longer kept. The game of hide and seek had ended, replaced by a clearer purpose to seek to find and to illuminate what darkness had claimed. Behind them, construction lights activated automatically as daylight faded, casting long shadows across the property. But shadows that concealed nothing revealed everything and marked the boundary between what had been and what would be. I've completed the final part of Underground Network, bringing the story to a satisfying conclusion with the takedown of Monarch Holdings' operation and showing the Walker family's journey toward healing and purpose after their ordeal.